Okay.
It says record, all right. So I would like to call the joint meeting of the Finance and Budget and Building and Grounds Committee meeting to order. It is 5:01, Wednesday, August 31st. First item on the agenda is the referendum and debt funding options presented by Baird Financial. Angela, did you want to introduce?
Yes, my pleasure to. We've asked Mike Clark to prepare the presentation that was included in board book, and he is going to speak with you about just several topics, including referenda and debt funds and so on. So I'll turn it over to him. Thank you for joining us today.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The presentation is fairly general, so we don't have, financing plans, so how much $10 million of borrowing is going to cost and things like that, because obviously, my understanding is the district's kind of still going through that process. But we just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of walk through a couple basic school things, just 2 slides quickly, and then talk into ways districts fund facility projects and also operating, because the operating referendums have become a bigger part of how school districts do business. I was assistant superintendent when Reverend Lewis had worked with the Sheboygan School District in the business office before I went to Appleton. And that's when revenue limits came into being, and the legislators said at that time, if you need more money, just go to your voters. And a lot of districts have taken great use of that. Manitowoc has not historically gone to the voters a lot in comparison with smaller districts, especially for larger scale capital projects. So we'll touch on that as well. So just opening up to the page 2, this slide here, we'll jump right to that. This state equalization aid, you hear that term a lot. You read in the newspaper, such and such school district gets $2 million more in aid. And why I'm touching on that is that was a big part of the last state budget. The money was put into the aid, which gave you no new money to spend. It was purely for taxpayer relief, and it has worked to that. If that was a goal, it's been successful. So again, it's your revenue limit authority minus your aid equals your revenue limit. So it's we'll see what happens in this next state budget, but this last state budget, again, didn't give school districts money to spend, which has put a little pressure on their budgets, and that's why districts are turning to the ESSER funds to kind of balance the books. The next page, in terms of how your revenue limit, this is another big factor with school districts across the state. The majority of school districts, probably 85%, are flat or declining. Maybe close to 90% flat or declining enrollment. And your revenue limit is calculated by your district membership is times your per pupil, that's the dollar amount you get per student, plus any exemptions. And this is where referendum would come in. We'll talk a little bit more about that, whether it be a recurring operating referendum or a non-recurring operating referendum. Non-recurring are the most common. That's with the exemption, and that adds to your revenue limit authority. So that's how the referendum fits into that calculation. Just wanted to kind of touch on that. And feel free if you have questions. When I do these types of things, typically there's a range of understanding, and newer board members, older board members of how these things work. I just wanted to touch on those 2 higher level points to see exactly what an operating referendum, how that fit into funding. So getting into capital projects on the next slide, there's 2 main ways. There's operational funds, meaning taking your revenue limit authority with or without exemptions and using some of that to fund capital projects. Historically, the district has done quite a bit of that. Actually, the only debt it has outstanding is non-referendum debt you're using to pay within your revenue limit. This year is the last
we'll finish after this year.
Yeah, last payment on that debt, and then those dollars are freed up to go back into, for another purpose. And so that's really using some of your annual budget, we just talked about, that revenue limit calculation, and setting it aside for capital projects. Typically, they're smaller scale projects, you're not building the buildings through that mechanism, but it's maintenance of maybe roofs, parking lots, those types of things. Not many districts are able to do that or have done that to any great extent over the last, probably especially 5 to 10, 15 years. Yourselves, Cudahy, come to mind in terms of districts who have been able to carve out some dollars to allocate towards that. Fund 41 and or Fund 46 is another, but again, that comes out of your operating budget. So you're making the decision that these dollars, the best use of these dollars is for capital or maintenance projects. Fund 41 you levy directly into. Fund 46 is a fund where you can move money into and you can hold that for future capital projects. You have to have there's some requirements, you have to have a 10-year capital plan to move the money in there, those types of things, but it's a way to save up some dollars if districts are able to do that. When districts went virtual, there was some savings for districts. Quite a few districts were able to move some money into Fund 46 if they had that. It's a good way to build up funds for particular projects. I know Pewaukee, when they opened their Fund 46, their 10-year capital plan had initially one item. They had a really good 5-year plan. They didn't have a 10-year plan. It was replace the turf on the football field. It's that simple, and that's and it's still on the list. Now they've developed a more extensive 10-year plan. But that's how Fund 46 works. I'm a big proponent of Fund 46. If districts are able to put some money aside, because the question always comes, not always, but very often comes up over working with districts on referendum. Why hasn't the district planned for some of this type of stuff before? Fund 46 gives you that option. Fund balance. Your district is very solid financially. Fund balance can come into play as part of the funding of projects. It's from a credit rating standpoint, using fund balance for a capital project, one-time expenditures, they don't look too negatively on it because they look at it as it prevents you maybe from borrowing more if that's part of the plan. It's when you get in trouble using fund balance is when you use it to cover operating ongoing expenditures. One-time dollars for ongoing expenditures, that's a bad combination. But in terms of fund balance towards capital or maintenance projects, it can be part of the plan. To what extent, people ask this question, what's the appropriate level of fund balance? And there's not a single answer for every district, but you definitely want to be able to avoid cash flow borrowing plus have a little bit of margin for unexpected events. It's a level that from a credit rating standpoint they like, and I guess personally I like. And then borrowed funds is another option. And again, some of that could be, like the district has now, non-referendum debt. You can borrow money, pay it back, but you have to pay for it within your existing resources. And that payment that's falling off, the district could make the choice of, we're going to reallocate those dollars for more maintenance projects, and we're going to borrow an amount and use that revenues or dollar amount to pay that back over 10 years or 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, quick question. I'm not sure if you know this or Angela might know, but you mentioned that we're basically be paying off that debt this year, if I heard you right. How much is that allocated in the budget right now?
Just over $1 million, so yeah.
Okay, where would that be on the, I guess, looking at the budget, would that be under like the capital projects fund or?
Fund 38.
Fund 38? Okay.
Or I don't know how he does it, just or fund, some people combine the 30s in some of their statements. It'd be Fund 38, which is where non-referendum debt is housed. And so again, those dollars to make that payment are part of your revenue limit authority, which you can make. After this year, you'll have the option of what you do with those funds, whether you direct it some sort of capital or facility or maintenance project, you direct it to, instructional programming or other needs, or combination.
Sure. And how long was that payment going on for, and how much did we finance the last time we did this?
That I'm not sure of offhand, but I
I
think,
can tell you.
I think we did look at a projection where, like, if we were to replace it, depending upon how long, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong on that, like, we could take out like 15 million over 20 years is your limits,
Correct.
on a bond, so then you could, for example, do 15 million, the rest is interest, and we'd be looking to make our payment around that same $1 million mark. So I can't remember do you have that on record?
Well, so if, and interest rates have changed, which we're not necessarily getting, but interest rates have moved higher. From a historical perspective, they're still very attractive from a tax exempt basis. But they have moved higher, and, gone are the days of borrowing for 20 years at 2%. Now you're closer to 4%. So, but this debt you have that you'll be paying off, it was originally issued in July of 2014, and it was a $5 million loan. And not much principal was paid in the first few years because the district had another loan outstanding at the time. And I just have your existing, I don't have what that loan consisted of, but that's, so as that prior loan was being paid, the district wasn't paying much principal here, and then switched to principal payments on this loan once that loan was gone. So the other way to borrow funds for projects, and this is the most common, and there's over $1 billion on the ballot in November for debt. So it'll give you an indication of the needs. And I think La Crosse is just under 200 million, and working with Green Bay, they're at 92, and Appleton's 126. Some large dollar amounts and some smaller rec firms as well. But the days of $5 to $10 million referendum seems to be gone, because people just say money doesn't go as far as it used to from construction costs, and then obviously rising. But referendum, you go to the voters, they give you approval, you issue the debt funds the projects, and you get a new levy authority on top of your revenue limit authority to pay that back. And then that authority that goes away once the debt's paid off. Now, if you pay the debt off in 2 years, that levy authority is just good for 2 years. If you use 20 years, it's good for the length of the payments. But once that payment is done, or debt is paid off, that authority disappears.
Thanks. Question, as far as when we're putting together our models for different scenarios and how different things look, do we equate into their difference, whether we go to bonding now versus 2 years from now, or if we go for a major capital referendum now versus 2 years from now? Do we build into there? Because right now, obviously, the economy is kind of a little bit of a roller coaster as far as what it is. Do we build into there some sort of projections as to cost of opportunity, I guess?
Well, there's two things from an interest rate perspective, because all I can tell you that 2 years from now, rates will be higher, lower, or the same as they are today. Beyond that,
But I guess but
to the point is, we do make it more conservative, because because we hate to get too optimistic and say, well, we think rates are going to be back at 2%. Chances are pretty slim that would be. And say 2 years from now, you're going to borrow at 2%. 2 years from now, we'd probably factor like a 5.5% interest rate. And today's rates are closer to 4%. And then from a construction standpoint, they'll typically build in some inflation factors on projects into the numbers. I don't want to speak for them, but that's typically how you build in a buffer, or to try to make sure the projects are obtainable when you get to that point.
Right, but when you're putting together the forecast, you could put essentially what the interest rate is of 2% versus 3% and
Oh,
so on.
sure, yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm-
Oh,
that's
I
what
see,
I'm-
yes. We run different scenarios, and we could say that for every, 0.5%, this is the impact on the tax rate, or if you have a targeted tax rate, for every 0.5% higher in interest rates, it's less projects you're able to do. We'd run through those scenarios.
Okay, and then, and those are provided to our finance.
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
great, thank
yep.
you.
And typically what'll happen, we'll start out with a range, we might run some generic numbers just to give the board, the district a feel for what the parameters are. Now, you don't have this issue because your tax base is very strong and you have very little debt. But you're limited 10% of your equalized valuation for your borrowing. In your case, it's a non-issue because you have a very large tax base. Smaller districts we're running into that just because projects are more expensive. The districts don't have the borrowing authority to build a new K-12 building. But in your case, you're fine.
What's the interest rate on a referendum approved debt?
It's that same 4%-ish right now.
Very comparable to bonding?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
So you issue bonds, you can issue bonds, whether it's in Fund 38 or if it's in referendum, you go to the same source for your bonding. Now, some districts will use bank loans if it's smaller. Now, some banks only like to go 10 years. But right now, the lowest rates on larger borrowings are in the capital market, where the district would issue tax-exempt general obligation bonds, which is, in Wisconsin, is a very strong backing. Wisconsin bonds sell very well because of that strong backing. You have unlimited taxing authority to make your debt payments. It's pretty good. That's the first thing you have to allocate for. So again, the referendum borrowing, again, debt capacity is not an issue for your district. Voter approval is the only way to get that authority. And then obviously the type of projects that you look at and how you fund it. Maintenance projects, carpeting, lighting, painting, maybe some lighter renovation type things you might put in that bucket. And then larger capital. I'm working with Racine and they're looking at building, a few new buildings, renovating a few buildings, those types of things. Sometimes you can look at an operating referendum question and say, if we just had an extra $700,000 a year or 500, whatever the number is in our operating budget, we can tick these things off as we go. We wouldn't necessarily have to borrow. You run into a larger capital project where, okay, we need to replace an elementary building. You're not fitting that in to your operating budget. So the nature of the projects dictate maybe the route you go and how you might fund it. Sometimes it could be a combination of the two. Because it is nice to have some dollars in your operating budget to deal with some smaller things on an ongoing basis. So again, back to the borrowed fund levy, referendum debt is voter approval, and non-referendum debt is within your existing revenue limit authority. Now, again, you can go for an operating question to grow that number. I worked with Eau Claire, and then Racine obviously is the biggest example, but even on a smaller scale, Elkhart Lake, they've done operational referendums and they do a small borrowing against that. They'll pay cash for some projects, they'll do borrowing, so they just have, and then they have some operating dollars that are for day-to-day operations within that same question. So that's a strategy that works. And again, on this slide, this showing you again where the operating, not recurring or non-recurring, fall in terms of your exemptions. And with the next several slides, we'll show you the extent it's being utilized. But the non-recurring, you go to the next slide, the non-recurring and recurring, non-recurring has a sunset. So the non-recurring can be for 1 year, could be for 1,000 years, but at some point it ends. And it's, the advantages of that is they pass a little bit higher rate, because I think from a voter standpoint, we're not giving you money forever. If you want money, again, you have to come back in and check in with us. And it gives you a chance to kind of reevaluate your need. You know, what's changed in your district? Is that amount sufficient? Can the amount go lower? It doesn't happen often, but it's happened a couple times. Or how much higher does that dollar amount have to be to maintain what we're doing? Those are the types of things the non-recurring give you. It's, you know, the typical term for non-recurring, where you're not funding a capital project, is 4 to 5 years, maybe 3 to 5. 2 gets very short, because you just finish counting the ballots and then you start planning to renew it again. Because again, most districts have to renew once you kind of go down that route. You just reach the point in your budget, you need that additional support from the voters and residents. Again, it has a sunset. The recurring, the dollar amount is divided, that you ask for, and if it's approved, the dollar amount is divided by the number of students you have and added to your per pupil in the revenue limit formula. So if you go back a couple slides, it gets added. So if you have 1,000 students, you ask for $1,000, $1 is added to your per pupil allocation, and it's there forever, which is great that it's there forever. You don't have to back to the voters. But quite often the voters may have in their mind recurring, problems are solved. We've given you this money forever. We don't want to hear from you again, in some people's mind. That doesn't always happen. Like in Appleton, they have their 4th recurring operating question on the ballot in the last 20, well, the first one was when I was there. So that was probably in 25 years. Their 4th recurring operating, just building that amount.
Question, so as far as the operational referendums, has it been done to, you know, when there's significant inflationary jumps, has it been used to offset inflation in the past?
Yes, I think recently, well, they go back to last probably 8 to 10 years, inflation has been less of a factor, and there has been some state funding. Now, the combination of this last state budget where there was no spendable dollars added to your budget and inflation taking off really brings that topic more to the forefront. I think it's always been a factor, you know, transportation costs, utilities, healthcare, you know, just cost of, you know, turn the lights on. It's always been a driving force, but it's never been maybe a main topic that was discussed. I think the current environment probably be changing that.
Thank you.
And then, so the other thing recurring is if your enrollment drops, again, it adds to your amount per student. If you have less students, when you do the math, you end up with less money at the end. And they don't pass quite as well on referendum. But the non-recurring is you're always subject to that voters saying, giving you the thumbs up. And as long as they do, you're okay. But there's been a couple of situations, Anago, Plum City, where the voters decided to say no, and it creates some real hardships. So this slide, just to give you a feel that, oh, sure.
So would that imply that a recurring referendum would not be subject to voters? Or?
No, it is. Both are,
Okay.
need voter approval to get the authority. The recurring, you don't have to go back again for that dollar amount. It's
Gotcha.
built into your formula. The non-recurring is one that at the end of the sunset, whether it's, you know, again, 3 to 5 years is the most common range. At the end of that time period, if you want those dollars again or a different amount, you have to go back to the board.
Is there a trend with districts where recurring and non-recurring are increasing? And is there a trend of moving from non-recurring to recurring?
There's the dollar amounts that we're seeing in operational referendum are growing dramatically. You'll look at a district like Verona, and I believe Middleton, which are growing districts around Madison. I think Verona has, it might step up to, but I think it might start at like $19 million a year, additional operating dollars. Middleton, I think, starts out at 15 and grows to like 21 or 22 million. They're on the ballot in November. So those are growing districts, which again, how the funding works, funding lags in those growing districts. So the dollar amounts are really pretty staggering. And we have a chart in here to show you how many districts in the state have 10% of their budget tied to a non-recurring operating question. We'll get to that in just a couple minutes. And as far as the not a lot, but some districts will make that step. They'll start with a non-recurring. If everything goes well, they'll move to a recurring when they go to renew it. They built up a little credibility. Or what Fort Atkinson has done is they'll do a non-recurring, and then they'll have the next election, they'll convert. They've done this once or maybe twice. A colleague of mine works with the district, I don't, but they'll convert that base amount to recurring and then ask for another non-recurring on top of that. So there's a lot of things you can do to kind of make that transition, because it is an uncomfortable place to be when you're every 2-3 years dependent on the voters.
I got a follow-up question, just really quick. And I know that we recently received something from, maybe it was WASB or wherever else I was reading it, but isn't Wisconsin approaching like a $5 billion surplus or something like that? And I wonder why we have to turn around and pull from the bottom when we should be getting it from the top. And that just bothers me, and I don't understand it all. So maybe you could explain to me.
Well, I think the makeup, between the governors, legislators probably, play into that.
We're sitting on a mountain of cash.
They
and we're
are,
sitting here trying to
absolutely.
go from the voters to pull more money, and it's like, what are you doing?
No, I know that's why I'm a little more optimistic on what the state budget might look like, regardless of who the governor is, just because they are sitting on a lot of money. There was just an article today about how many states are looking to write checks back to taxpayers. Because a lot of states are sitting on surpluses because they get so much federal money that they're using up because they have to.
Yeah.
So not spending necessarily what their direct revenues are, whether it be sales tax or property tax or whatever it might be. And it's building up these surpluses, so states are looking for ways to utilize it, and many states are considering or have committed to write checks back to the taxpayers. How exactly that works, I don't know. It varies by state. Wisconsin's not at that point. Not that they don't have dollars that could do that, but that's not the discussion. But in terms of why those dollars aren't being allocated out, I really can't. There's no insight I can offer other than I think it's just the legislative makeup, which again, depending on how the election goes in November, the legislation is not going to change hands. It's really who the governor is, and then.
I know if we went to the voters and voted on whether or not we issue that back to the schools, we'd get a pretty good turnout. I mean, a lot of people would rather.
That's why we don't.
Unfortunately, that's not an option.
Right, I know that.
But
It's just sad to see it.
But in terms of having conversation with legislators and getting an understanding of what's happening, I think that's the best avenue for the school district, school board, board of education to try to gain those answers or try to share your concerns. So,
It's a great question.
yeah.
I have an opinion. You've given us great examples of different districts and their strategies. Can you give me some comparable districts that are similar to ours, size, situation, debt level, and what they're doing right now?
Oh. You're how many students?
About 5,000.
Okay. Yeah, it really varied, given the location, because, Pewaukee size-wise comes to mind, but they're growing. It's a different animal. Their operational budget is in decent shape. They've gone to referendum several times for facilities. I'm working with Denmark, they're definitely on a smaller site, but, they have they do an operational, and the debt, they're on the ballot for debt question this November. They separate, that's a good example, they separate their operating question and their debt question. Some districts have it on the ballot at the same time Appleton has it on the ballot at the same time. So I think there's more, just size-wise, I think that's one category to kind of see what other districts are doing. But I guess other factors are what have you done in the last 10, 20 years in terms of facilities? That's a big factor. Where are you growing, declining? Geographically, what's happening? In that area. Obviously, the ring around Madison is much different. You can have a district the same size as you, but that's just a different environment that they're operating in than you are here. So those are the types of variables, but we can definitely, as we move forward, kind of give you some, if that's more I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, but I can definitely give you more information. On the last April, we worked with, I think there was 34 debt questions on the ballot, and we worked with 32 of them. So I'm just I'm drawing kind of a blank right now.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's all right. That's all right. But I mean, I just want to emphasize that there's other factors other than size. It's, I call them the Tommy Thompson high schools back in the mid-90s when your tax rates went from $20 down to $8 when 2/3 funding came in. If you're one of those districts that built a Tommy Thompson high school because your taxes still went down even though you were building a high school, puts you in a different position than somebody who district who didn't make that. So there's a lot of differences. And I always caution people not to get too worked up about what others are doing and focus on, okay, what do you need to get done in your district to meet the needs of your kids and match the desires of the community in terms of tax effort and those types of things.
Thank you.
Can I add us something real quick? I think we, as Mike had mentioned too, with our debt falling off, with the uniqueness of each district, we have rising costs, we have that debt falling off that the board could, desire to go back and sort of renew and reborrow for, and large capital needs. So I mean, there's a lot of possibilities just within our own situation.
Yeah, and just to use a ballpark number, I don't think you ever answered that question you brought
Oh,
up
yeah.
before, is if you took that same $1 million and you borrowed for $20 million, you'd have to pay interest on that. So you're probably looking at $15 to $16 million of projects if you make that commitment to keep those funds to make debt payments on a non-referendum.
So you're saying that would get us 15 to 16 million bonded debt with that same
Well,
payment structure you're
yes,
saying?
and then in some of those dollars, then you'd have to pay interest on that. So you would have 15 to 60 million up for projects.
Thanks. Tony, did you have something?
I did, yeah. I'm curious, given our history with referendums or the operational referendums, have we ever looked at or considered a recurring referendum in this district?
Not for many years. They did I'm gonna forget all of a sudden, the last three since 2015 have all been non-recurring.
Yeah, right.
I wanna say in 2000, before that, they had tried at least one or two attempts for recurring and they failed. So all of we're 100% for failed on recurring. But I think
Early 2000s.
yes, when we were trying to add the food service program, I think it was at least twice they went to add food service and then that wasn't well supported at the time.
Yeah, and some of that could be just what the ask is. I mean, if it was really driven by the food service program and it may not have been a tax impact, it might have been just philosophical differences in terms of, do we want to raise taxes or increase the budget or both for that purpose?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's real simple. If we're relying on these to survive, then we're either don't have enough money to begin with, or we're not spending our money wisely, right? It's one of those two things, or maybe somewhere in the middle, I don't know, but, that's what I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
So back to this slide, since 92, 341 of the 423
It's around there.
school districts have asked for operating question, and many of them, especially the non-recurring. This is just people who've asked at least one operating question, so it's a good percentage. And then this chart shows you how many districts have 10% of their operating budget or more tied to a non-recurring, meaning they go back to the voters so often. So about 71, 72, this number will go up depending on how November referendums go. So 1 in 6 school districts in the state are, 10% of their budget are tied to that voter approval. And this doesn't count the ones that are recurring. They're not part of this calculation. This is the one because and you can see that growing over time. Combination of funding, declining enrollments, rising cost, get back to the inflation aspect. And then around the state, and these pages, you can see debt referendum the last 10 years, pass and fails. Now, some of these have gone multiple times. So these are just districts within the last 10 years, at least passed or failed one or more questions. And then the next slide is 10-year history of non-recurring referenda, passed, failed, again, highlighting where in the state.
Can I add real quick? I just did the numbers quickly on 4.3 for our non-recurring. Right now, we're at about 6% of our total levy, or revenue limit. Just in comparison where there's that many doing 10% or more.
Sure.
So we're under that percentage for the budget.
That's right. And then you can see the charts that show, again, I like the maps, just give you a feel to kind of get to your question of people around you or maybe similar size, and we can get you the names if that's of importance to you. But
I'd be curious to see that.
yeah, you can see we can get that sent to you. The recurring, there just aren't as many. You'll see that a large number of the ones that pass are down around Madison. And then, and then the last slide is, last two slides. One is referendum dates going forward. I just want to touch on that, is that in fall of odd years, there are not dates eligible for school districts. There's no scheduled dates, and the special elections are no longer allowed. It's been that way for quite a few years. And then the dates that you have to, so if you would be looking at an April 23 referendum, by January 24th of 23, the paperwork would have to be to the municipalities. So you're making the decision that third week in January at the latest for an April referendum. So from a timing standpoint, it comes up kind of quick because it's the paperwork has to be there 70 days prior to the election date. And then the last slide is just the district's historical mill rate. Going back 2013 to 22.
Thanks. Quick question. So the referendum that we're on right now, are we gonna have to apply again next year if we want to
Correct, but we can go, we can pose the question to the public early, so it's not like a last chance, and so that was, one possibility that we can explore is going this next spring. And, part of that can be just to renew it, and for it to, pick up when the current one drops off. Or what some districts do is, let's say we decide, okay, we really need X amount extra, you could say, well, we have 4.3, we want to bring it up to $6 million, so, add that difference for the first year, and then, have it be $6 million moving forward. So we have some options with how we could handle that.
So with that renew or increase, both are adherent to the January 24th deadline, correct?
Correct, and we'd want to just do that December, January, or, just not wait till the last minute. So we would want to, take care of that by the beginning, as a board, by the beginning of January to timely file it in a timely fashion and not be last minute on it. So that's like the absolute last deadline.
And one other comment, you're limited to 2 ballot questions in a calendar year. Whether they pass or fail, you get 2 questions. So in odd years, it's less of an issue. But in even years, people look at, so well, if we'll ask 2 questions in April, if we fail, we'll come back in November. That's not an option. You've used up your 2 in April and you're done.
Is that typically 2 ballot questions, that's it, or 2 ballot questions associated with referendum?
Two. Well, I think I've not seen like an advisory that you'll see like on municipalities that most of them have advisory referendums. I've been with Bear 22 years. I've never seen like an advisory. I've only seen when you're asking for additional levy, whether it be operating. So you get 1 operating, 1 debt, 2 debt, 2 operating, 1 of each. And that's it.
Gotcha, thank you.
And then, and so when you plan out your operating question for non-recurring, I always like to have it end in the last, because the fiscal year is an odd number, because your renewals, then you get the spring prior and the November prior and the spring prior to giving you 2 chances to renew. We can talk more about that as things develop. But
So just to clarify,
Sure.
Do we have funding for next year or through 23? And
Correct.
this is for 24 we're talking about?
Well, through 22, 23, so this budget and the next budget.
Okay.
So another thing that may be helpful for everyone to know that is part of the puzzle, like when you as a board approve the levy each year, you always have the ability to approve less. Okay, and I say that because, we're gonna have a couple of factors that are gonna come into play, a couple of unknowns, and so we can make an estimate. We won't know where CPI is gonna be exactly when we're gonna write the question. We're not gonna know a lot of things. So, we could, we gotta feel comfortable with that number. And you always, as a board, can say, we're gonna under levy. You have the ability to do that. So if you could say that, well, we might need, considering inflation, you might say, well, we'll approve this much, but we're gonna only do this much these years. There's a couple of ways that we can handle it. So the board always has the ultimate control to, decide how much is levied each year through the budget process.
right. So using this April of 23 election, that January 24th date, the governor's budget usually comes out in February, and you'll be passing your resolutions prior, unless somebody gets you information without knowing exactly what they're thinking. So you will have to make some assumptions. And let's say they come out and say, we're going to give every district $600 a student for 2 years. I don't think that's happening. But if they would, and the voters say, wait a minute, we just gave you this money. Again, to the point, you don't have to use your full levy. I mean, there's districts every year who under levy, sometimes unintentionally, but under levy. And so that is definitely an option, and that's definitely something to make clear. And because again, especially if it's non-recurring, at some point, you're like you are now, you're back to the voters.
This slide, this last one, the mill rate, this is ours, correct?
Correct.
Our data? Okay.
Yeah, and getting back to the inflation, and then I'll, my last comment, unless there's any other questions. The municipal numbers have come out for property valuations that came out middle of August, and we sent you your estimate.
Yes, 16% increase.
It's not an absolute, because some municipalities you don't have 100% of, and so what part of that municipality within your district, how did they grow compared to the other part? But it's close. The state as a whole is up 14%. So you will see tax rates falling. That's just, and so I think in this environment where you're getting these bigger property value, that the levy becomes more of a focus. I know Green Bay is really focusing the referendum on the levy amount, not necessarily the tax rate, because the tax rate's gonna fall. But that total levy, so it's just something, if this continues, we do anticipate another, last year it was 7%, it's 14%. We're anticipating, maybe 5-6% next year in terms of valuation. And a lot of that is inflationary. If you have subdivisions, cornfields turning into subdivisions, that's great. But for the vast majority of school districts, it's inflationary growth. So all that means is the homes people lived in last year are just worth more this year. So in terms of communicating that, it's really important that it's not, the high valuation isn't necessarily a windfall for school districts that if they had the ability to, we can back our tax rate back up because it fell $1 because we just want to be conscious of that. So.
We will likely fall to the high 5s, low 6s.
Really?
It's early, but with
You're
that.
saying our mill rate?
Huh?
Our mill rate will
Mill rate.
high 5s, low 6s?
Oh.
I hate to give a pointed number at this point because there are variables.
Yeah, you don't know your state aid number. Our valuation number is going to be close, probably plus or minus 2%. You're going to be in that 14 to 18% range. There's some districts that are over 20% in terms of valuation growth. And then the differences between your communities is another thing to watch as well, because that determines what communities get what share of the levy. And it's really creating some, I'm working with Pulaski, and they had some municipalities up 5% and some up 25%. Well, that creates some real shifts in the levy.
It provides opportunity for us to discover or discuss and talk about many different options.
So as you want to explore different options, whether it be on the operating side or the debt side, we can definitely put options together. I know the district's working with the budget model in terms of trying to help determine budget needs going forward the next 5 years. And again, in the absence of knowing what the state has in mind.
Does anybody have any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Sure.
Let's go back. Can we just do it? Can I take a break?
Want to take a little,
Well,
a couple minute break?
couple break, that's,
All right.
I'll leave this
I'll do it.
recording right now.
Yeah.
sure.
I'm just not going to disturb if
You
people
guys
can.
wanna get some materials situated?
Just like us to sit or stand.
Yeah, you guys can definitely sit, that's perfectly fine. Thank you. I can pass this down too. There you go. Thanks.
I have a copy, but I want to bring a facility on it.
First slide does.
I'll leave this with the superintendent. Does he already have a copy?
He does not, actually, I think he might have a copy of a different one, but.
I'm gonna get this to him then, thank you. Did you give me these?
Oh, they want to do that. Oops. I'm just
close out of it and not save my changes. It was like,
Computer, so if we're gonna re-download it,
that
yeah.
would be bad.
Oh, it's the, okay, this is. I guess maybe it's in, oh, it's down here.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Sure. So do you want me to send it to you? How would you like to, or just text it to you? Sure.
I put together a list of every single representative email that we have for the state. Is there any rules against emailing?
You're a private
Every
citizen.
single one all at once.
You,
I'm sending a mass email. I just don't understand why they're sitting on a fat stack of cash and you can't.
yeah, you can email them just because you're a taxpayer. You can
It's
just-
not, right, good. I just want to make sure, because I'm gonna email it, but I'm gonna do it from.
About 5 billion?
Yeah.
So you're kidding.
Huh? Sitting on.
Everybody's gonna want that. Yeah, everybody's-
I just asked them, I'm emailing because they're not calling. But I'm gonna email one to every single one of them. It's got every single one of those put together, and I'm gonna just put them in the same email. And I'm gonna put together a professional with nasty grammar and say what.
Point it.
Huh?
You're good, right?
All right,
No.
all right, everybody, I'm gonna bring this back in.
Okay, that's right. Thank you.
To move forward with the rest of the meeting. We have, the next item on the agenda is the comprehensive facilities assessment and vendor options. Chris, if you wanted to make the introductions.
Sure. These fellows are from CISA 10 out of Chippewa Falls. And I'll let them introduce themselves. They've got a PowerPoint that they'll go through. You'll have opportunity to ask questions just like we do with Mike Clark. Then when they're done with the questions and answers or whatever, Nexus is in my green room in my office, and we'll bring them in, and then those guys are gonna go. So if there's any questions after that, we can kind of circle back with that. So that's kind of the strategy of how we're gonna do this. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys' time here this evening. My name is Tony Menard. I've worked at CISA 10 for 7.5 years now. I'm a facilities management advisor. I'll let the other two here introduce themselves quick.
I'm Luke Schultz. I'm the Associate Director of the Facilities Management Department, and I've been there for 12 years.
My name's Nate Carell. I'm a construction project manager. Been with CISA for, I think, 11 years.
So, looking at us as CISA 10, everyone thinks of CISA as kind of regional, based, kind of helping out districts in their area. CISA 10, we have statewide facilities management services. And so we actually have team members across the state. Luke and I are out of the Chippewa Falls office, and Nate is here in the Green Bay area. And we do have some project managers near Milwaukee, and then as well as we have Madison office as well. So looking at just our team as a whole, we're spread out, but we really offer as much as we can to as many districts throughout the state. Some of our different services that we offer here are, like we're going to talk about in a little bit, is our facility audits. We have referendum planning, construction management, owner's representative, environmental consulting, and asbestos and lead testing. So those are kind of a high level of just what our services are that we offer with our facilities management department. A couple of the ones that we're going to kind of go into in a little more depth is going to be our facility audits as well as our referendum planning here in a little bit. We do have a little bit of more of a unique approach as being a CISA, we understand the needs and look at things a little bit different in our approach. Just working with school districts a lot more than most contractors do. So one thing that we like to do and really focus on is bring in experts such as architects or engineers when needed. Okay, a lot of times on different projects, they'll be brought in, they'll kind of oversee stuff, and you guys have to pay the fees for their services. But a good example of where we can, eliminate some of those services is when you take a look at, let's say, a roofing project. We understand roofs, we've worked on them quite a bit. We don't need to bring in an architect or an engineer just to give specifications for that and add those fees on top of the project. So that's a way in our approach where we try to find ways to save some money for the district in their projects and try to find different ways to just maximize and make your dollar go a little bit further than most companies.
Just to elaborate a little bit before we get into kind of our facility audit and our process, but we are a CISA. We work with schools, and we're schools government, but our main focus, I would say 98% of our work is schools. So our reputation and not going anywhere and being detailed is very key. As you guys know, districts talk, they communicate. To give you an idea right now with our environmental health safety projects, we are working with over 130 school districts throughout the state. We know schools, that's what we work with. And we also have that expertise where we have our facilities management department at CISA 10, but we also have those experts to reach out to when you're looking at space needs for special education and different things like that. Is we have those experts in-house that we can reach out to into those special areas when you're looking at schools and going through that focus side of it. But go ahead, Don.
Right. We'll jump into kind of our process that we really try to focus in on for our facility audits. Once we have the signed contract and we get some utility data, we try to do some work beforehand before we meet with the district. We'll benchmark your guys' district as far as your utility usage for each building. It kind of gives us an idea of, before we sit down and meet with you, what we can take a look at. If there's a certain building that seems like your natural gas or your propane is higher, your electricity is higher at a certain building, then it's up to you when we meet right away before we do any walkthroughs with the district staff. And that's the next thing where we go from. So once we have that benchmark, we have some information on the district, we like to sit down right away with district staff such as buildings and grounds, administrators, principals, teachers, so that we can really get an idea of how the buildings are working for each different group that utilize the spaces as much as possible. This kind of helps us, kind of see through the eyes of, the teachers or other staff in the building, so that we know if we're going through a certain elementary school, maybe it's cold in one area of the wing of the building, and maybe, someone might not know that a little bit higher up. So if we can find a way to reach out to as many of the staff as possible when we're doing our walkthroughs, that's just going to help us build a better facility assessment for you guys in the end, so that you guys really know where you need to put your funds at as far as your capital improvements. After we have that meeting with the district staff, we'll identify on our walkthroughs any maintenance needs and costs. And then from there, we'll take all that information, put it into a matrix, which we call a prioritization matrix. This is a working document that we turn over to the district after we are done with the assessment. And that kind of gives each building, it sorts out the different FIMs. And what a FIM is a facility improvement measure. And it kind of rates them as far as, from what we talk with the district, what looks like it's going to be the most highest need to get done based on a couple different criteria. And we'll kind of jump down to that right now. But from that, we'll review the findings with the school board, with the district's buildings and grounds team, and kind of deliver that before we sit down with the board and see if there's any questions or any adjustments that we have to make. going back to the prioritization matrix criteria, this is what we have in that matrix, and we'll show an sample of the matrix in a second. But what we really look at is functional conditions of different pieces of equipment, building envelope, roofing, all that different components that go into making a building a building. We look at, where it's at with its useful life, any environmental concerns. So if there's lead paint, asbestos, those type of situations, it could be hazardous. If there's a nail sticking out on the playground, those things will really dive into details on that. Project cost, return on investment, and the long-term needs. So the long-term needs is if the district sees maybe a certain building is kind of outgrowing or not being utilized to its potential, then we can kind of add that into our matrix. But looking at the matrix, this is kind of a sample of what our matrix looks like. As you can see here, we'll have the FIM labeled there on the left part of the matrix. And then we'll give a description and then a recommendation on what needs to happen with that FIM. From there, we'll rate it or give it that score. And then if it ranks or has a very high score, that means it's a pressing issue, a need that probably needs to be taken looked at. Yeah.
Do we have a copy of that, or can you hold that up?
There is in your folder, there should be an example. I believe most of them have it.
On the right side.
It's just a sample though, Tony.
Yep.
Just sample. So in there you can see caulking and sealants is one of the FIMs. It gives a brief description of that FIM, then talks about what our recommendation would be for that specific measure. Then we go into our ranking of the score and why it has that type of score that it does. We'll list what we think the project cost might take to upgrade or improve that measure. And then from there, if the district gets this working document, it's an Excel document, if once that project, you guys are able to cross that project off your list, you can go back in. And so where you would look at your useful life, you could drop that back down to a 0, and everything would kind of populate that FIM back down to the bottom. And then each year, your staff can take a look at that matrix and then reevaluate it and adjust the FIMs as needed down the road.
You look, I left an example of a facility audit report up there. Portage School District was a recent one to give you an idea, and then you can see how thick that is and how detailed it is with that, and there's a lot of information. So when you look at something like that and you have multiple pages, we like to break that down of what is your looking at the next 2 to 5 years, the next 5 to 10 years. So when we look at that and when you get delivered that facility audit, it also helps tee it up for you and your communications as you move forward. Here's things we need to look at in the next 2 years. Here's things we need to look at in the next 5 years. Here's things we need to look at in the next 10 years. So that way, depending on what direction you go, this sets it up for, we have this X dollar amount of needs in 2 years that we need to worry about, let alone looking at in 5 years. Here's what our current budget is, but it helps you to start with those conversations. For example, when you get a district this size, just think if all your roofs at one time needed to be replaced. That's more than likely not going to fit within your fiscal budget just with how expensive roofs are. So it's a good communication tool to help as a starting point to just for that knowledge and get that message out there. But it's also a great tool for the district to be proactive as it's a spreadsheet and it's a moving document. And as you complete projects per each building, you can keep moving that document.
A question, Chris, actually. How does this integrate with what we've already done? Because I know that we have looked at, I mean, you've got quite a few pamphlets of people have already gone through and done a lot of assessments already with materials and money and how much and all that other stuff. Is this something that they can look at, or is it they've done, or who, I mean, like how does this work to where we can skip all that, or what? I don't get it. You know what I mean? I know we already have a lot done, is what I'm saying.
That's a good question, which is my code for I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
There's a lot of information there that they would certainly say, this is great. Give me all of the roof surveys you got. It gives you it saves them time from measuring roofs.
Detailed, and I know we already
It gives you the age of the roof and those kinds of things, and that would be dovetailed into something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. So I think the critical thing there is dovetailed in there so you have a complete plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
What you don't know now is what you don't know.
Exactly. And so when we
And
sit,
I would say that there's probably two major components. You probably got critical short-term need and kind of a longer-term need about how things evolve.
you got it.
Sure.
And that's the sit down, to your point, sir. Absolutely, we want to look at what you've looked at. We don't want to reinvent the wheel type of thing, but at the same time, we want to look at it. So here's a roof map.
Absolutely.
And we got roof sections for each one of these buildings. This roof has been here and we've had an inspection done, we've had infrared cameraing
Right.
done, all of that good stuff. We want to take all those details, and the best part about it, that's why you see that report is so thick. It includes everything.
Good,
So-
I just want to make sure, because I know we
Yep.
already invested some money in having people do those assessments. I'd like to make sure that we're utilizing that instead of just starting all over.
Great question,
Let's throw that
absolutely.
money away and let's do it all over again. So,
Yep.
okay.
Nobody knows your buildings better than you guys do and Chris,
Right.
right? So that's where that first
Well,
introduction
Chris,
meeting,
like-
we want to find out, what are some areas of concern that you guys have? When we're doing our audit, if it's not raining that day, there might be, we might not know if there's drainage issues in certain spots.
Sure.
We can see different things, but that's where that informational piece of it, it's a full day of interviews and getting your principals, and it's individual meetings, but it's very detailed.
Okay, as long as we can get them that information too.
Yeah, it's part of the story.
Yeah, okay.
So you guys don't have one of these for us, right?
You could keep that, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. I'd also recommend when we get down in here, though, we have a couple referrals, but you can go right on the school websites, which they have facility audits, but it also show just the different things that we do with our construction videos, our referendum planning, and the documents that we can do. This is just a very small piece of it.
Can we get a couple extras of those for like our superintendent and our buildings and grounds as
I
well?
think we have some, I think we have the Outbound, I have a
I know you said that
PDF
they were
copy of 2 district
other-
plans.
We might have an older one. I think we have, these are updated, is that correct?
We did Montello, we did a facility audit there, and I believe that might be one that you've seen in the past. That was the example I was talking about.
Okay, yep.
I don't know anybody.
Do you maybe want to, even if you send some PDFs, then we can just send the files, to save.
The reason why I sent that email is because they're too large. We got a size limit with our email,
Oh,
but
for
there
sure.
is an email that's got facility audits. There's 2 examples in there, and then there's also 2 links that go to
Oh, yes.
referendum websites.
Actually, we have it. I can share
Perfect.
that with.
Great, thank you.
If you guys, open those up, download it. If you have any issues, just send me an email. My card's in the folder, and we
Got it.
can
Thank you, sir.
get you whatever you need.
We'll go to the next slide here quick. We'll start talking kind of a little bit about our referendum planning, and it's called our project development agreement. This will include our CISA 10's facility audit, with the referendum campaign and construction management services. So that's all included in this PDA is what we kind of abbreviated as. One of our most popular services. Our referendum success rate over the last couple of years has been 93%. And we really try to take a personalized approach with each different district that we work with because like Baird was talking about, your district's unique and you got to focus on what your district needs are. And so we can't necessarily come in with the same approach that we worked with Elk Mound or Winter or someone like that. We need to make sure that we're listening to you guys, listening to the community, and taking that approach to how we're going to help you guys in a successful campaign for your referendum to make sure that your guys' facility needs are going to get met, because we understand the capital cost of this is it's a big burden on the district. We want to make sure that we're here to help you guys through that process to make sure that it goes as smooth as possible. Yeah.
Do we have any idea what that looks like if we were to address the stuff that we need to cover from a facility standpoint?
Like from a cost standpoint, or?
Yeah.
We, in the current, I would say like very, the first needs that come to mind that we have listed we're submitting like our updated Fund 46 10-year plan, which is just a draft of what this in-depth facility analysis will be. I think it's in the $40 million range, and we have estimated like $100 million, that we, if we were to really look at everything in total. I mean, and it could be a very wrong estimate, but it's in that area.
100 million over what time period that it would have to be addressed?
Time period, I'm not sure. That would just be kind of like the quantity of the needs, and then the district would have to decide kind of where Mike talked about like Fund 38. If we would do something like that, we could hit the most urgent needs and then plan to do a capital Fund 39, because the 38 you as a board would approve, and then the Fund 39 would be voter approved.
But wouldn't that all be explored in the audit that, what we're seeking currently?
Correct.
So we're kind of
Yes.
putting cart before horse right here. You know, we would want to find out what the audit would explore and find, and then we would find that number, correct?
Yes.
And again, you have two components here. You have a component of what your operation needs, and then what your facility needs. And obviously, you're looking at a combination of those two in terms of what your total resource base might need.
I'd almost expand a little bit too, and you also have to find out what your community's appetite is.
Correct.
So
Understand.
you have your facility audit and your operational, and then you have, that's part of the planning and the community development that we get into, and you get in those community meetings, and you'll see on the backside is an example of, on the left-hand side, there's an example of a survey in there. But it's good to reach out to your community, and that's one thing that we really pride on ourselves on, is we probably have too many meetings, but you want to make sure you are getting as much of that community feedback back as possible, where you might have $30 million worth of maintenance needs in the next 5 years, but your community is only going to support 10. So then that's where you have the tougher conversations, and you need to prioritize, and you start getting into those community meetings. And if you have a team that you develop, which we can get into the weeds further, but then that's where you're prioritizing, okay, we got 20, we need to get down to 10 million. What are our priorities? Yes, sir.
So Angela, if I'm hearing you right, you're suggesting just back in the napkin numbers, we don't really know for sure, but somewhere from like 40 million to 10 million or 100 million in maintenance items that we need to address in the next decade.
Yes.
And then if we pursue this audit, we'd have a much clearer picture of what that would be, and we could prioritize, needs and how we approach it.
And as a board, you would just have typically have the final say in what projects we address. The board would say like, okay, it's not like you would say, okay, we can do X amount of money, and then, we do like it's a conversation between everyone involved. The board would say, this is what we want to move forward with. So it's a inclusive process. So it's not just like where we make the decision.
Yeah, knowing that we have a timeline for January 24th to make decisions and have paperwork done, how long is your process take?
Good question. So a lot of that depends on the availability, but typically our facility studies are 90 to 120 days to deliver a preliminary report. We've done preliminary where you have 40 days and it was, last minute. To back up, if you're planning for a referendum, the longer time that you have to plan, they typically say 9 to 12 months is what you want. And if you start getting less than that 9 months, then it's getting a little bit tighter of a time frame. But it's about 90 to 120 days. But fall, our time slows down because we're really busy during the summer doing construction projects. But right now, fall, winter is when time opens up for us to really jump on this.
So we need that now.
If you don't, if you don't mind, I'm sorry that you don't mind that I add in. So this is where it's really critical to understand that Fund 38 option, because the Fund 38, just renewing that bond and say we borrow a certain amount of money to just sort of replace that expense that we've had annually, would buy us time to do a full in-depth review. And so we could start the more critical projects if we were to renew that, and then take, like a more comfortable amount of time. I feel better about that. I think, as we've had conversations internally, we all do, because then it wouldn't be a rush job, and we don't want that. We want to do it right, get the community involved and informed. So that's where that Fund 38 and 39 comes in handy. So we wouldn't have to do, we could do just an operational referendum in April and then wait to do a capital either the following year or the year after that.
And as we heard before, there's different options. You
Yes.
can do a lot of operation, you can do both.
Can we afford it? As far as waiting, on some of the capital, because we have certain things that are like, look at Washington with the stuff around the, I mean, the
Yes.
bricks fall, I mean, it's safety wise, we gotta make sure there's certain things, and I know that I've been in several schools in the last week, and I'll tell you, the one thing that's pretty consistent is that it's hot, with no airflow, no air conditioning, and it's disgusting. And that's prior to adding hundreds of little kids' bodies in there, heating everything all up. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
I chose to go work in a factory. I know it's gonna be 100 and some degrees in there, that's me, but I guarantee that's not what these teachers are thinking of when they're going through schooling. You know, how kids, they're gonna be working in a sauna, you know? So that, to me, was just flabbergasted.
I'm not a construction project manager by any means, and Chris definitely is the expert of our buildings and timelines and these gentlemen here, but you also have to think there's a certain timeline to activate and work through using those funds. So like if let's say we hypothetically approve as a board to go and renew that bond and you have $15 million you can use, it's not like you can break ground the next week. You know, there's time to mobilize on it and to take care of the more critical projects. Definitely that we can get some people there, but windows is a great thing. We have windows in all of our secondary schools and some of our elementary schools. That's a process that would take several summers, you know, to replace all of the windows. So, you know, it's not like we wouldn't address the most urgent needs.
Just a little bit more context, because I don't have the
Yes.
history here, so this is an opportunity for me to also learn, and I'm not sure who has it, but as I would want to reflect back on our past, knowing that Chris has done some work to, as you mentioned, Matthew, to develop some component parts of this assessment so that we're becoming more knowledgeable. Okay, but we haven't bundled it necessarily in a plan that we really can kind of get a full assessment. But we've had, and I understand that this community has been very supportive of us, a referendum. You know, I have to put that in context, but my guess is we haven't had a lot of information to support what we've been going out for. Okay, and you know, so there's a difference here, right? I mean, so, you know, somehow we've conveyed a need without really having, you know, more detailed analysis, you know, to support that and to put that in context. That's why one of the things we're trying to do here.
Right, and I know not everybody's seen those ones that I was talking about, but I would say either have Chris bring all those here or go to building grounds and look at that.
Well, I mean, that's why, you know, we assemble stuff that we've already done. I mean, we're just recognizing the importance here of having a good context here of what are we talking about and the urgency behind it, and strategically, short, long term, you know, two-step approach, or, you know, are we in a ready state to even think about a bigger option? You know, you know, we just have to be able to make informed decisions. Just curious, because you stepped in and assisted Montello before I was on board there. When did you come in relative to their going out for referendum?
I'll let Nate, because Nate was very involved with that one.
Yeah, and it was a while ago, but it was a long time. I am gonna venture to guess that it was 2.5 years or something like that. It was a good couple of years. We went through several community engagement activities. We went through the audit process. We actually, I think that we were, dating, a lot has happened since Montello. I believe that we were brought on in Montello because they were unhappy with the
Correct.
provider that they were using. At that time, we started.
Did they have a failed referendum before you came on board?
When we came on board, the referendum was failed. Then they hired us, and then we went through the referendum planning and it passed, and then Nate managed their project.
This is just an informational piece, you know, obviously, yeah, we feel really good when we're making informed decisions, and obviously the public is looking for us to make, you know, informed decisions. So it's an educational process, just as what I'm identifying in terms of the value of this.
I would agree 100%. I think the more that we could show the public that we've done our homework and there's really a need, and it's not just a bottomless black hole of getting more money, you know, without the justification. I think that goes a long way to getting support.
To give you an idea, Elk Mound School District, we're currently wrapping up their phase 2 projects that we passed was a $15.7 million referendum. We did that facility audit in 2016. Then transferred into, as we delivered the facility audit, that we got bigger needs here than what we thought we do. And then it turned into a referendum planning, and now it's been 2.5 years of projects and we're just wrapping those up. Where they started at 2016, they passed it in fall of 2019. That's how long they were planning for that referendum.
So, Matt, you had a question?
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
it's more like a comment at the moment. Out of the respect of your guys' time, I don't want to talk too much about already what I know about the situation. So I don't want to hold you guys up. Thank you very much for your information. But I will talk more to your points about what you've been just talking about informations, about audits that we've done already and where we actually are at the moment. So I don't want to insult their time at all, so I'll talk after they leave before Nexus comes if you'd like.
One thing that I wanted to ask is for your plan that you're presenting or your proposal that you're. So I did the math real quick while we were chatting here. You said 90 to 120 days to deliver. 90 days from today is November 29th. And given that deadline that we have of January 24th, that offers us 56 days from that point to provide, to come in under deadline for, referendum. Does that timeline, is that something that's possible for you guys to do properly? Or would it require, do you think, a bit more time?
It is doable, and we've done this before where we've come in and it's been a tight timetable. And what we would do there is we would say, we're not going to deliver you a full completed audit within that time, but we're going to go through each of your facilities and the top, 10 things that you need to get done in the next 5 to 10 years will be on that list with a cost estimate. So we're getting the items that would be potentially on your referendum. But for example, if you just did your roof and you did it within the last 10 years, we're not going to go evaluate that roof because we know it's good for 20 years. And then till after we get that done. But if you're looking for the full comprehensive, it's going to be tight because it's very detailed. You got a lot of buildings here, and we're opening every closet door. We're looking at everything.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
It sounds like a lot of these projects from, the beginning through the audit process to, breaking ground and doing actual work can take years, right? So how do you guys, I guess I'm curious, how close have your construction costs been to what the audits show? And how are you guys, what are you seeing now in the current environment where just costs are the most what you're gonna get from day to day?
I can take it. Okay.
Go ahead.
I would say over time, I felt very comfortable in the numbers that we've given. I've done a ton of, I think I've done both the audits that you've seen. That we were batting, 500, doing really well. In the last 6 to 12 months, I would say, in the last audit I did, we were working in Portage right now, numbers exploded to the point where going into it, I knew this was happening right now, and I was inflating my numbers, and I was telling folks I was inflating numbers, and they were higher than what I expected them to be even at that point. I think throughout this last 12-month construction period, we've got a firsthand taste of what has happened. So that's not going to happen again, and it's been extravagant over the last year.
I think the tough part with that too is you do a facility audit and then 7 months from then, now you're bidding it out. And in an environment that we are in right now, proposals that we're receiving are good for 6 days. And if it's not signed, yes.
Wow.
And so when you're looking at a school district, it's a different approach. You guys got your school board meetings that you got to get it approved for. So, but I feel that the market is getting somewhat a little bit more stable where at least the costs are inflated right now, but we know what those costs are.
And some of these timeframes of construction schedules that have been come up in conversation, keep in mind, these are building a new building, doing a major renovation, doing big things. It's not as though we can't do an audit, look at a project that we don't need architects and engineers on and just get it done. So there's also projects that can happen very quickly. It's not just usually the big ones.
So how other districts manage that now? I mean, if you go in and then you're like, oh, surprise, it's gonna be double what we told you.
That didn't happen, but you dig back into the numbers, you reevaluate what's happened in Portage, and just thinking of the last 6 months, what's happened is We received bids, they were horrible, and we rejected them. We got a general contractor on board who, through them, we were able to rebid certain items of the project, and a lot of times it's just timing.
Yeah.
If you ask contractors to bid, and we thought we were planning timing perfectly, and everybody just got busy during that rush. Anyways, numbers came back in as subcontractors had more time to look at things. So like, oh, okay, well, we could do this at this time, and we didn't want to give you a number in a month at the time you asked us to. And things have come down since in Portage, since we bid originally.
Do you use local workforce then?
Using them extensively in Portage right now. Yeah.
Very good question. Oh, go ahead.
Last question I have is, could I just see your fee structure, maybe send it to all of us so we have it, for everything? For your audits, for your, reviews or your presentations, in between things, your plans for referendums, and then your construction.
Ours is simple, and I can lay it out for you right now. To look at just a straight facility audit, it's 7 cents per square foot. And then that's where they say looking at a PDA is more of our favorite, because if they know you are going to a referendum, everything is lumped into that, and it's $10,000 for that. And that is waived if the referendum passes, and then we would be your construction manager. And I think this is one of the key things, and Matt, thank you for bringing this up, as most people, when you talk to, they're going to be able to do a facility audit. Most people are going to be able to help you through a referendum planning. Everybody's got a little bit of a different approach. I really feel the big missing step that schools, when you're looking at this, is what is that next step when the referendum passes? Because more than likely you're locking into an agreement with both parties, or what party you lock into, that they're doing your work after the referendum passes. And that's where you're really getting your value with CISA 10 is I highly recommend the referrals that I have in there to reach out to them. A couple superintendents have been through multiple different projects with multiple different contractors. We're 100% transparent. You guys will see when we do roofing bids, for example, we get 5 of the local contractors here. You will see them. Chris will see those and can go through each proposal if he would like. We're not hiding anything. And our construction management fees are 2%, which covers our behind the, with our construction software and things like that. And then our time and materials. So Nate, who is on site, we charge for our staff. We need to get paid. We're a nonprofit, but we want to feed our families, but that's what we charge. We don't have the cabin. We don't have the 100 acres to go take you hunting on. We work with schools. But that's a huge difference between us though, but I just want to make that clear, because we charge our time, that's it. There's no general conditions. There's not charging for our truck while Nate's driving it, plus his time, plus his mileage. We don't do that. It's just time and materials. And if you reach out to some of the superintendents, they've done other projects, at least 10 to 15%, you will see savings.
That sounds reasonable. I'm just curious, that $10,000 for the audit, is that for all the buildings, or is that just?
Correct.
Well, that was 10.
No, it's 7 cents per square foot.
Well, the way you explained it,
7 cents is just the facility study. So if you're just looking, we want a facility study to plan for the future, you do the facility study. If you feel you got work on the backside, which we've done facility audits and then formed it or morphed it into a PDA, we're here to help. We'll work with you. That PDA would slide the facility audit to the side, and it's $10,000 that includes the facility audit and all of our marketing and campaign through the process. So that referendum passes, then that fee is waived. Does that make sense?
So it's not the 7 cents, but if we choose.
It is if you just do the audit
If you
and
just do
then
that,
you
right.
go somewhere else.
Correct.
But if you lump that into a procedure of let's go for referendum
Right,
and it passes.
and then it
you waive
passes, then that's waived, and then they
3 different
become a
structures.
construction manager.
3 different structures.
Got it.
It's actually, it would be 2.
Yeah.
It's either facility, if you want a facility audit, it's just 7 cents a square foot,
Okay.
facility audit. If you're thinking, if you're gonna go the referendum route, it's $10,000 and includes everything.
How many square feet do we have?
$1 million.
$1 million.
So the 10,000 would be.
More ideal.
It would be cost savings for you big time, yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're talking, what do they call it, 7, something like that.
That's where I'm going when you look
What if
at.
we don't do what if we go through this process and like the referendum doesn't pass, and or
The referendum doesn't pass, we charge you $10,000.
And that seems like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you just do the 10 grand?
Because we're gonna pass it. What? Because we're gonna pass it.
We're gonna get it passed, right? No, listen, I agree with you, but there's a lot of school districts that just want the facility audit.
Sure.
And it's a lot of time and it bogs our marketing team down. And that's, to be honest with you, that's what it takes for us to do a full facility audit.
And to touch back on a question you asked 10 minutes ago, if you did decide that you wanted just a straight up facility audit, like I think we just said it might be $70,000, that's not enough time.
Yeah.
I'm the one doing it.
Yep.
To do the full
I appreciate the
scale
honesty. Thank you.
$70,000 facility study.
Is there a certain timeline with which you have to go to referendum? So that's where I'm saying, like, if we would want to do the 10,000 option, okay, do we have to go to referendum within a year, or is there?
We're here
Or
to
if
work
we
with
say,
you.
or if we say we're gonna go to referendum in the next 2 years, so we'd like to do that. So I don't know if there's a window to commit, and is it all upfront payment, or is there just like a?
We don't charge until after the referendum date. And we're very flexible.
Here's another curveball. What if we did like our own, or we did bonding or something, we didn't go to referendum? Would you guys, obviously that's negotiable of what you guys would try to do, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, cause maybe we don't go to referendum, maybe we just borrow money again, like, or we renew, you know, just saying like, is that an
We're still
option
getting
for you?
$10,000.
No, I'm saying, is that an option besides?
So you still do projects, but it might be out of Fund 46 or
Correct,
something?
yeah, something
Yes,
different.
correct. We've done
That's what I'm
facility
thinking.
audits where we're done $2 million worth of Fund 46 or something like that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. You guys have been very, very honest and truthful. Thank you for your time for me.
Is there anything else you want to cover?
I'm on this slide, I don't know.
We
if
did
you want me
interrupt
to
your
go into-
presentation.
No,
but I appreciate the questions.
You're okay. We
perfect,
kind of went into everything. I would highly recommend either the Elk Mountain School District or the Winter School District. They're two referrals, current referendums that we're doing now. If they've done projects the other way, we have a very unique approach when we do it. For example, as you roll into those projects, there's going to be things, maybe there's a structure issue, then you need a structural engineer to come in there. But there's nothing that the district wouldn't need that we would bring in, where you don't need an architect for a parking lot. There's even schools that we're working, for example, Elk Mountain 15.7, there's an architect that's involved for 6 million of it, and there's an engineer that's involved for 8 million. And so it just depends on what you need it, and there's huge cost savings to the school district by doing so.
You explain to me, what was the Elk Mountain total
15.7.
15, and what about Winter?
Winter, I believe, was 4.5. That was a smaller one.
It's in the first page here too, Chris. in these little
Yep,
handouts.
4 million.
Yeah.
I know you guys did do handouts for those here. We also do have our strategic planner that's joining us virtually right now. Can we also make sure that we get some information for him to as well?
I
And
think
I
that,
should give an extra just folder that we could give.
yeah,
to
and
them.
I think that email would be great if you could send it
Yes.
out to your whole party.
Oh,
That
could you pass one down for Chris too? I forgot to give him one.
Kristen, okay.
I did you know, but I thought
Can I
maybe
get more of these?
President,
I
or
think
you
I have
guys
one.
should.
Yep, again, with that email,
I gave it to him.
that email will be very helpful as we can forward that out to the group. It's got actual facility audits in there. It's got links to referendum web pages that we're doing. And so when you're looking at a matrix, it's all right in there. So we'll get that email over to you.
Sorry, one more question.
Yes, sir.
Who reached out to you, or did you reach out to this district?
I reached out. We met at Montello School District and then just had a phone call here and so Jim reached out.
Jim reached out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And how long has CC10 been doing this for?
Good question. Doing projects, 20 plus years doing referendum projects. I think it's been 6-7 years.
You guys are nonprofit, right, you said?
Yes, yes, sir. To give you an idea, we got, and most people think of 6 years, our staff, Nate, he came from Brown County, did some huge projects. People see what we do and how we do it, and they like our unique approach. We got project managers coming from some of the biggest general contractors in the area. They enjoy what we do, and not only that, they see the end product, and it's with schools, it's with kids, it's great.
I like the output, that little binder thing is nice, so.
Right, but I know that we have that as well. I want to know if that's gonna help speed up the process, or we at least give a direction as to where to look first. I don't know.
We do have another person that is also, so we gotta preferably move this along a
Okay, go
little
ahead.
bit, so. Anybody else, any other further questions for the gentleman?
Thank you
All
for your
right.
time.
Thank you very much for coming and
Thank you.
presenting,
Appreciate it.
and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
No, that's exactly what my thought was. Fuming. But I'll take that up at a time.
We have a big audit done there. I happened to do my due diligence when I got on the school board, asked the questions. He showed me all the binders.
Right.
So it's, I don't, I'll do it professionally in front of them, I don't care.
Sure.
Okay,
We're
so,
being recorded, right?
yeah, we're still live.
Okay, so we have the audits done already. Me and Matt looked at them when we were invited to go to the facility. And I reviewed them like for 5 minutes. And we have a lot of the information of what's wrong with our district already. It's all been documented. We've paid Nexus. I asked Chris, he told me $50,000 already to do these reviews. Pretty much we have a roadmap. We need the execution done.
Right.
The
So
only
like,
thing I would wonder though is I saw the same documents when I was on buildings and grounds and there was
Yeah.
nothing that was ever done with it.
that's the problem.
That is the problem.
That's the
So
problem.
that's not okay, but, and that would be a discussion for a different time. But what I would wonder is, would those still be even valued
At
as
the
other
price,
things?
I mean, no,
You know, I mean, would
nothing's-
there be changes?
Nothing's accurate unless it's.
Yeah.
It's possible.
all
Yeah,
of
I
it's-
think
yeah,
that's-
Considerable amount of money.
What was the total? There's not, 100 million is a good estimate.
You guys
Yeah,
were right
that's a
there.
good estimate, yeah.
It's a good estimate. I think there's so much, there's so much. Probably 200 million a day. No, I'm saying like, it's probably a good estimate. You gotta kind of pick and choose, you know?
No, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about,
Oh, it's nice. Not bad. Not bad.
No, it's not. You know,
Yeah, do you have your,
brick, heating, cooling.
I got them.
I wanted to.
and I don't know if you want to go into the recording room,
So-
you want to go into the meeting.
Yeah, I think they were.
That's exactly.
Otherwise, were you?
Yeah, I do, so what I did for them is I put it into here and I put it on there, you know, it's like with this, with other people on the screen and that, or, you know, they're not with you.
for the purpose of that, projections to?
I can see, I can make it as much as big as I can, let's see here. Yep, no,
I was gonna be.
yeah.
tough to
I haven't missed one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your help.
Oh, not a problem.
From Chippewa Valley, Claire.
Yeah,
Which one do you want, the most recent one, the
The one with-
614?
Pretty much the Northwest. It's called.
Sure, I've been to all of them. I've been to.
No, I'm saying those people.
Yeah, sure, sure. I've been there. It is, like.
Decided to come back here because the Lake Michigan, the fish were so nice.
Make a living.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta make a living where you can make a living. Me.
But I was recommending anybody, Coral Player or the Valley.
You kind of agree.
Yep, and I have, no, it actually comes up on the phone, I mean, it's, it
Oh,
comes up full screen
Okay,
here,
so
When.
but it's not, it's projecting in the meet, that's kind of what the,
So just go.
It's, that whole 94 corridor.
Okay.
was all in Madison. It's just beautiful. And then you get the lacrosse lights, like
Yeah.
you get Minnesota. Wall.
Hold on.
Okay, so
This
the.
stuff, it's very pretty.
Oh, it really is. Nice towns.
In the
hold on, these are both
Northwoods, you know,
USB.
like Hayward and all that, it's a little different than the previous.
Yeah.
Mine, you know,
There we go.
it's a little different, but it's very similar.
Do you want me to pull up something else on here, or?
But it's like 3.5 hours.
No,
Oh, that's for just your, okay, got it, okay.
Thank you.
Chris, before we start, I had a question for you. the binder that you do have with all the tuck pointing and et cetera, is that, what company was used for that?
IRSC, which
IRSC.
stands
All right,
for
thank you.
Interstate Roof Systems Consulting. They did our roofs and our tuck pointing. And then we used, I do a lot of acronyms. We did STRSCG, did our hardscapes, which is our blacktop and our concrete that's not sidewalk. So the playgrounds and parking lots for our hardscapes. I ran out of money to do the internals of the buildings with, like boilers and some of that infrastructure. So that was my next phase when I first started, to get some baseline data on what's the oldest of our oldest, what's the worst of our worst.
Sure.
So I did that with roofs, tuck pointing, hardscapes, and then I was gonna launch into the boiler, plumbing, HVAC, that type of stuff. So that was where we left off.
Thank you.
So these guys are from Nexus. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves and tell you what they're about. We have worked with them. We're currently working with them a little bit with some smaller projects. So there's some, I'm familiar with them, but I'll let them speak on their own behalf. So guys.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Good evening, and thank you for hosting us tonight. My name is Jeff Mangan. I'm an account executive with Nexus, and I'm here tonight with Mike David, who's one of the principals and founders of our company. And the two of us will share information with you related to who we are as an organization, the typical plan development process we follow to get you from where you're at today to a point of certainty, that you're, high degree of confidence in the plan, that you'd be willing to approve it to go to referendum. I'll turn things over to Mike, and he'll talk about the importance of financial strategies as part of the plan, because without them, you really don't have a plan. You've got to study, and studies typically sit on shelves and collect dust and become obsolete really quick. So we'll talk more about some of the details behind our comprehensive planning. We took a swing at putting together a timeline because we're informed that there, at least to now, that there's a possibility you could be going in April of 2023. And so we took that approach in putting together the timeline, but again, that's preliminary. So we just wanted to give you a glimpse of that. Then we'll talk about next steps and moving forward with Nexus. And at the end, we'll share information with you directly from our clients about their experience in working with us. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to stop me. So a little bit about Nexus. We recognized a long time ago in the development of comprehensive plans that they need three critical components. The first is a strong technical solution. The second is a corresponding financial solution. And then also you need a good communication strategy to share these findings with the public so that they support it. So it's a three-legged stool. We're your partner from start to finish throughout the entire process, from beginning to end. A few facts about Nexus. We were founded by Mike and two business partners. They have over 25 years of K-12 experience. In our 10-year history, we've developed a strong team of 80 client-focused team members who provide expertise ranging from facility planning through finance, communications, architecture and engineering, project management, and commissioning. We've secured over $2 billion in projects between the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin. We've got 100% success rate in passing referenda, and we have a very low change order percentage, in fact, the lowest in the industry, which indicates that, the better planned and developed and designed a project is, the more smoothly the construction will go, and you don't need as many change orders, which are costly. We also have the validation of CISA purchasing, run through CISA 2. A few years ago, they conducted an exhaustive analysis of firms that provide our types of services, and they selected Nexus as an exclusive partner that they then market to the 425 school districts throughout the state.
Can you so CISA's worked with you guys in the past?
CISA,
Two.
CISA
CISA
2. Yeah, CISA.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay,
Yes, CISA 10 is the facilities group. But interestingly enough, CISA 2, who analyzes companies out that do facilities management and facilities consulting, selected Nexus as their exclusive partner statewide.
Instead of 10.
Correct.
Interesting.
That's what I was saying.
Yes, it was.
Put that together.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to back up too for a moment, please. What do you attribute to having a 100% success rate with the referendum?
A lot of determination.
Well, like what sets you apart from others that you would have 100%?
Yeah,
That's a big claim,
it is a big, yes, it is. Something we're extremely proud of.
right?
No, I will say first off, the vast majority pass on the first attempt, not all of them do.
Okay.
But they all have eventually passed. And the single, well, it goes back to that three-legged stool of we're a very conservative company. We pride ourselves on developing truly pragmatic needs-based plans. Okay, we're extremely thorough. We develop our financial solutions, and we don't displace Baird at all. We work hand in hand, but we come up with very innovative ways to fund the project so they're very affordable. So the tax impact of our plans is less. Third is we are very big into community engagement in terms of if we have the right plan and it's affordable, let's put the right story together and go out and tell it. So we get communities involved, communities that are confident, that have faith in the school district are likely to support plans. So it's really all three of those play in there. Our community engagement typically starts up front. We don't just wait till the end and say throw a plan out there and say, can we get the public to support it? We get them involved early. And we're also very data driven in that we do a lot of polling as part of our plans. We'll often poll up front to find out what does the community think of the school district. And then we'll also test the plan along the way to make sure that we have the right plan. So by the time we're going to referendum, we're fairly confident that we have the support. Now, when it comes to a referendum, anything can happen. Something could happen 30 days before, some big event could happen 30 days before the referendum. It's got nothing to do with the school district or the plan itself, and could upset the voters or what have you. But anything that we can control, again, we're very data driven, very thorough, and we understand all three aspects of technical, financial, and the communications piece. So kind of long answer to your question, but does that help a little bit?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, no, yeah. Go ahead.
All right, so here are the results of our efforts over the course of the past 10 years. We've acquired quite a few clients throughout the states of Minnesota, Wisconsin. I know the question was asked earlier about similarities with other districts, and answering it from Nexus's perspective about which clients of ours would match Manitowoc in terms of relative size and situations. It's really tough to read, by the way. I can't read it from here. But I would say Stevens Point, Wausau, DC Everest, Oak Creek, and Wisconsin Rapids.
Yep. They're all fairly similar to you guys in size, and especially when I would think of Wausau, Point, DC Everest, the communities have got some similarities as well.
So few people recognize the importance that quality facilities have on student achievement performance. The first factor with the greatest impact are involve parents. Second are inspiring teachers. And third is quality facility environments. And there's many studies on the subject, but where average performance improvements on standardized tests comes in at 15%. What's interesting is this is contrary to what's happening in the state of Wisconsin with a estimated $6.5 billion in deferred maintenance throughout Wisconsin public K-12 that's growing at 7% a year. So obviously there's a tremendous need for improvement. Your school board has a fiduciary responsibility to maintain and improve facilities, but we're here to help with that. And I know at times it can seem like mission impossible, but we make it quite possible.
So again, kind of reiterate what Jeff was saying there. The key is the buildings themselves, a lot of people don't understand, they do have a direct impact on a child's ability to learn. So it does impact the core mission of the school district. The research shows that there's been thousands of studies done. Second is for community members maybe that don't have children in school, should they care? And the answer is yes, because the least expensive way to maintain our facilities is do just that, maintain what we have, okay? Again, we have $6.5 billion of deferred maintenance across the state of Wisconsin, growing at 7% a year. You do the math on that, the cost of doing nothing is $500 million statewide, okay? That's why there's so much work going on, is people are recognizing. And there's also, since the Great Recession of 2008 to 2010, there's a real understanding from the public that we are better off reinvesting in our existing facilities than running them in the ground and building new. And there's a point in a time where it does make sense to build new, but in most cases, we're better off reusing. And many of our buildings have got good bulbs. We can modernize them to today's standards, and it's much less expensive than trying to build new. Typically, the rule of thumb I often get asked is when do you determine what's more cost effective? Some states have published guidelines on this, but typically it's when the cost to renovate exceeds between 60 and 70% of the cost of building new. Again, and that's assuming that you can make the facility like new, which in most cases we would have to do that. Yes, sir.
I'd be curious to see those studies linking achievement to better maintained facilities.
If we'd be glad to provide them, but always if you Google the impact of school buildings on test scores, they've been done all over the country, all over the world. But again, I can provide you.
That's a good number. I mean, I'm just thinking about how do we get more support from the community. I think everyone wants to raise achievement.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting is when you talk to people and you explain it. Most people, it's not like they're sitting around thinking about it on a day-to-day basis, but when you explain it, my personal experience has been they get it. And if you just think about it, whether it's if we're at home or if you're at work and it's too hot or too cold or the lights are too bright or too dim or stuffy or this or that, it impacts all of our productivity. And people, again, they don't think about it, but you explain, well, students aren't any different. They're like, that makes a lot of sense. It gets further compounded if you think about the average classroom size is about 900 square feet, okay? If you said the average home was 2,000 square feet, so say roughly the size of 2 classrooms, okay? If we have an average of 25 kids in a classroom, if you put 50 kids in the average house, one won't happen to it, and it's nothing against kids, just think about it. And 2, think about how hot or how stuffy it would get in that house on a 65, 70 degree day. If you think, you have 50 people in your house, right? That's what a classroom is every single day. And you start to explain these are pretty basic concepts to people, and they're like, makes sense. I never thought about it, but I get it. So if that's helpful, but there again, we can also, there's also been white papers written on the impact of school buildings on real estate values. Now, some people don't want their real estate values to go up because you got some in your house, what we just talked about with valuations going up. But there is there's no doubt that investing in our schools is in the long-term interest of our communities. That helps. But again, we can provide you with this.
All right, so a little bit about our planned development process. We introduced the concept. We've had a chance to walk your buildings on numerous occasions with Chris. That's what in part resulted in the small projects that we started. Tonight, we're at a point where if you're ready, we're seeking a agreement on a partnership development agreement to move forward, which would enable us to put the entire solution together, all the pieces we talked about, the technical, the financial, communications plans. We would review those with you. We wouldn't just hand them over to you and let you read them. We put together a comprehensive report. Mike will show that to you in a minute. But we actually guide you through the whole process to take a close look at the plan and look at each line item that's been generated and determine the type of project you want to put together, all the multitude of facility improvement measures that we'd evaluate. And so you pick the project only when you're comfortable with the plan from a technical standpoint, financial, and with regard to the community, would we ask for board approval to move forward on the path towards a referendum.
Key on the partnership development agreement is we've been doing this a long time. I was thinking about it. It's coming up on my 30th anniversary actually, and a little over 10 years as Nexus. But one of the things that we learned actually, a superintendent said to me a long time ago, he says, well, if you guys are as good as you say, Mark, put it in writing. And we said, okay, we'll do that. We are 100% confident that we can get the plan to move forward. And so the way, in essence, the way our partnership development agreement works is we don't win until the district wins. Okay, so we will bear the cost of the entire development of the plan. So obviously, we're going to be very judicial in what we do because we're bearing the cost. But we also want to make sure that we do it right, because unless we get put the right plan together and get it to go forward, we aren't getting paid. So the key is we will absorb all the costs. We will front all the costs to put the plan together, to work you through the consultative process, and then once the plan is funded, then the agreement is we would provide the professional services that are necessary to implement the plan. Professional services being planning, design, construction management, commission, any services that you'd have on any typical project. That we bid out all of the trade work. We competitively bid that. If you've got local contractors you work with, or have a relationship with, we can certainly negotiate on the district's behalf. But otherwise, we believe that all school work should be competitively bid. So we aren't doing any of that in-house, just providing professional services. If there's work that the district, and Chris and his team have got the ability to do in-house, if we're not providing value, you don't need us to do that work. So again, the idea is it's a true partnership. I think our approach is we're meeting it well over halfway, and that maybe 3/4 of the way. We will provide our expertise, everything to put the plan together, and again, until it goes forward, we don't win. So does that make sense?
It does. So the one question that I had for you would be, and it was a similar question I had asked previously, is there a timeline that is associated to your overall process?
Yes. Can I respectfully ask you to hold that question?
I will hold that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Trade places.
Oh, okay. Now we're on something near and dear to my heart is financial strategies. Which, by the way, sorry. When I was listening to Michael Clark talk, and I've known Mike for a long time, and we've worked together on a lot of different projects. And I think you may have had the question about, can we do like I'm paraphrasing, you're kind of saying like a sensitivity analysis, like a scenario analysis,
sure,
interest rates, or time.
Exactly, yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking that's exactly what we do. I'm going to show you in just a couple minutes. Okay, so the financial strategies. First off is when we're looking at things, I mentioned that we're a very conservative organization. And if you look at the far left, we're looking at first off, how can we self-fund as much as possible? How can we make you get the most value out of your current budget? Okay, are there things that we can do more efficiently? Can we figure out, are you spending money now maybe repairing things on a recurrent basis because you don't have the money to do a wholesale replacement? Is there a better way to do that? So how do we get better value for your current maintenance dollars? And I'm not saying that Chris isn't doing a great job. I'm sure he's doing a phenomenal job. There's just a limit with what he's able to do if we can bring some more sophisticated strategies in terms of financing. We talk about restructuring debt. In this particular district, you have no Fund 39 debt. You have very little Fund 38 debt, so not a lot of opportunity there. But there is an opportunity to do some wraparound debt, which is a little bit of what you've done with your current debt structure. Are there any existing levy authorities? Whether that be Fund 80 or then you get into different funding, Fund 41, Fund 46, things like that maybe don't have additional levy authority. But is there a way to they do have an impact on a local levy, and is there a way to use those more economically, again, to get the best value for the taxpayers' dollars? We want to integrate the facility planning and the financial tools, so kind of go together of what's the best way, what's the optimal way to do this? And I'll show you how we've built the tools to do just that. We also, part of this is about communication. okay? And interestingly enough, as I mentioned, I've been doing this a long time in 2 different states, and I've never met the community yet that doesn't think that their own property taxes are high. And I've also never met the community that knows how they actually stack up. And part of that is about, so it's about doing the research. It's not just about the buildings. It's also about looking at how do we compare to our neighbors and other districts out there, and then having that information to share, right? So that we're able to say with confidence, here's how we measure up, you know. Your mill rate, I have no doubt you're gonna be on the low end. What's interesting though is when, and I think Mike mentioned this also, that it's common to talk mill rates because it's simple and it's data that's easily available. But interestingly enough, the school district doesn't have a lot of influence over that. You influence the levy, but you don't influence property values, right? I mean, not directly. But we also look at things on a levy per student basis. You do have a little more control over that. So we kind of look at it different ways. And it's again about understanding communities and understanding how do we stack up. So it isn't just about buildings, it's also looking at the other metrics. And then last but not least is where all of these are designed, how do we minimize the impact on our local taxpayers? Nothing can be done for free, right? But there is a way to do it more efficiently. There's also a way to help people understand what we're trying to get accomplished here. Getting into some tools, right? So the comprehensive planning and timeline. So a couple of tools, and again, given the time we have, I'm just kind of skimming across the tops on this.
I like the picture, by the way.
Yeah, I do.
That's from Manitowoc.
Yeah, that's my marketing person does a great job of mining, the web, Facebook, whatever.
I might have been there last week.
So.
Chris, I think you're in that photo.
So our comprehensive planning really has a kind of a 3-step process. First is assessment, doing a truly thorough assessment. It starts with strategic planning, okay, which I understand that you have a very locally driven strategic planning effort going on now, which is fantastic. We're frankly, it's perfect. We also look at things from a multi-year planning perspective. Let's not just look at what do we need to do now. Let's look out 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I always try to advise our clients that just because this school board may adopt a plan that's maybe a 20-year plan, it doesn't mean that future boards can't deviate from the plan. Just do so knowingly, right? That's the most efficient way to do it, right? So let's put together a forward-looking plan. So maybe you can't do everything now, but the plan builds on itself over time, okay? We look at educational adequacy, which is a fancy term for how do we modernize learning environments. The way teaching and learning is done today is dramatically different than the way it was 50 years ago when most of our schools were designed. Okay, 100 years ago, right? So how can we look at, how can we make sure that the building supports the educational mission, it doesn't hinder it, right? Demographics and capacity, the amount of students we have, our community is shifting, where families live versus where the schools were built. Many communities that's moving. And we want to make sure that our school districts are right sized. I think your districts, in my understanding, have already taken some steps in that direction already. And then last but not least is for the facility conditions. So here's some talk about building envelope and various things. When we approach projects, we look at everything from the simple way I like to call it is from the lot lines in and the grass tops to the roof tops. I'm going to hand out a study, this is a live study from not too far from here actually, but it'll just give you a sample of how we organize information. I'll kind of explain it. And then in the back of it, gives some of the financials of how those are put together. I'll explain that as we go here. So we pull everything together. Then once we have all the information, we work with you on how do we solve the problem? What's the right way? It's a multi-year plan. What is it? So we develop the technical and financial solutions, work with the district, the community, get feedback, keep refining it. Ultimately, once we have a plan that meets your needs technically, financially, and we believe that we have community support, that's the plan that goes forward to the board for approval. And if there's a referendum, ultimately goes to the public. And then on the far right is once we have the plan funded, we look at implementation. So funding approval is part of that, architecture, engineering, energy conservation, construction commission. So it's all those professional services that come. I heard a little bit about this when we were walking in, and we just want every district that we work with in varying degrees. Some have got studies and binders, others have got a list, various things, and it's very common to rely on outside consultants, but the challenge with it is they're all disjointed, okay? And it's not knocking them, but it's just something we found is a way that we could help our clients out is, and maybe, for instance, priority one for the hardscape people versus a priority one for the roofing people versus priority one for infrastructure. Are they all using the same priority ones? So how can we pull all of this together so we can get a comprehensive look and see everything in one spot and know that it's all in a common format? Because while I can't assure you of much, I can assure you that, because no district does, you won't have money enough to do everything. So how do we develop a prioritization approach that looks at everything in a common manner? Okay, that's what we do in our studies, and we pull all these studies together and put them into a common format. Okay. Again, we include in there the demographics, education, historical, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It used to just be districts had a catalog of desks and whatever else, order 3 of those, 20 of those. Okay, furniture, fixture, and equipment, because of the way teaching and learning has changed, that's become a science all by itself. And like anything out there, when you see them in a catalog, some things can look exactly the same. There's lots of great products out there that are really useful. There's lots of well-made products that aren't useful. And there's lots of products that look really cool, but a year from now, they're not going to look so cool. Okay, and it's really become, because we work with school districts all over a 3-state area now. We don't know everything. We know a lot about kind of what works, what doesn't, and where's a good place to spend your money. So that's really has become a key thing. Capacity, we talked about financial capacity. Again, I'll show you our financial models, and I can't emphasize enough, we do not displace Baird at all. We put financial tools, we have the financial tools that help you make decisions, and then Baird validates that, and they do the actual debt structure. Okay, we don't do that. We'll show you how it might work, but they would do the actual details of it. And we even go so far as creating schematic floor plans so that during the study phase, so that you have an idea that this is actually all going to work. And it helps. That's also what helps us communicate to the community, is we've thought that far ahead on. Okay. In addition to a written format, in the back of that book, you'll see a series of spreadsheets. Everything's also done in spreadsheet format that can be live and updated every year. Okay, if I zoom in on this, it's a little hard to see, but you can see that, you'll see in this far left-hand column, some of the rows have X's and some don't. And we have FIM. FIM stands for Facility Improvement Measure. There's a code which ties back to the written write-up that you could read all about it, all the detail. Brief description, which just kind of gives you an idea of what it is. What's the priority level? How's it funded? Is it referendum, Fund 46, capital, et cetera? Okay, and that can be toggled, kind of coming up with what's the right mix of funding. And then what's the project budget? Okay, so all in, what's the budget? And keep in mind that when we're providing a budget, it's a very realistic budget, but then once the project is approved and funded, then we go through a detailed design process, and then we're bidding everything up to qualify contract. Okay. In terms of the left side here, based on our experience and expertise and the knowledge that we would gain in your school district, we would come to you with a recommended project, but ultimately in our consultative approach, we allow you to pick and choose and build your own project. And we'll oftentimes, we'll even have like a phase 1, phase 2 here, so that you'll say, this is what's going to be in phase 1, this is going to be in phase 2. There's times on referendum, we just had one a few weeks ago over in Minnesota where they had 2 questions on the ballot. And so we use this, we just put question 1 and question 2, and we're helping the district and the board work through with this tool, what's going to be on question 1 and what's going to be on question 2. This is linked to, and I recognize this is very hard to read, but this is the financial performance. So up here, we're identifying, this is linked to the previous spreadsheet. So as we're checking items in and out, okay, our totals are updated. Oops, excuse me. So as we're checking items in and out on this sheet, that is linked to this sheet. And now we're saying, which projects are we going to fund? Maybe if we have savings projects, if we know that we can wring, pick a number, $100,000 a year of budget reducing savings out of the budget, can we use that savings to pay for the improvements themselves? Okay, if we have a high degree of confidence in it, we could. Okay, and there's many cases where we will have confidence in, because we're calculating numbers, we'll guarantee the savings. Okay, so then you'd have confidence, and then we go out and we get a bond, it'd be a Fund 38 debt, and maybe it's 10, 15, 20 years, and we use the debt to make the improvements, we use the savings to pay the debt back. Okay, thereby you're making improvements, your total cash outlay on an annual basis is still the same, but you're making, say you can save $100,000 a year, make $1 million in improvements, back to the interest out for a moment, make $1 million in improvements, save $100,000 a year, pays for itself in 10 years. Okay, just in very simple terms. We also have this concept says capital, so we can do the same thing. This is what you've currently done. You've got $1 million a year debt service payment on Fund 38 debt. Our tool, we would factor that in here to show you how that would fit in. And then the last is the referendum financing. I don't know if you can see it. I apologize, it's a little hard with the screen here, but we can adjust the interest rates, we can adjust the terms, as well as is it funded with Fund 38, Fund 39 debt, and play those what-if games. So as you're checking items in and out, and ultimately, we're coming over here, and this is showing the tax impact on the local community. So the mill rate impact on an annual and a monthly basis, and then what does that do over the course of time? Is it flat, up, down? What is that doing?
So this dashboard, is that available for us then to utilize as a district throughout the entire length of the project for even our own publication to speak to people?
We, this tool, we want to be able to drive it for you just because there's enough variables in it. It's not, it's not robust enough, but
Sure.
we would work with you on an ongoing basis
And how to
on
put that
how
out
to do
there.
that and plug it in, and then provide you with, here's the results you're looking for, in terms of how we would communicate that to the public.
Thank you.
So yes, it's, in partnership with us, it's available on an ongoing basis. Make sense?
Yeah.
So again, I think this one, when I heard you asking before about various scenarios.
Yeah.
This tool right here, we literally, and instead of saying, okay, go to Baird and they say 10 million and get you this and 20 million of this, and what's that Fund 38, 39, what's this? And then, okay, then go back to Nexus or whatever, and okay, guys, what are these projects gonna cost, and does that fit in, and then that. We literally can do all of that in one meeting, just sitting, clicking in and out on this sheet and coming up with our financial scenarios here. Literally, it's updating instantaneously. I've had other consultants say, I've had other superintendents say, what takes 4, 6, 8 weeks, maybe months, we're doing in hours. This is an incredibly powerful tool. My business partner and I developed this, been using it for well over 20 years. Once we have a project that meets your needs technically, financially, or technically, and it's affordable, third leg of the stool is how do we get community support? Okay, so this is something that really starts early and continues. It isn't something that it is a one-time thing. This starts early in the process, getting the community informed, understanding where the community's at. Okay, and that's done through a number of different approaches. It's communicating with them, whether it's newsletters a lot, surveying the public, open houses, things of that nature. It's keeping them engaged through the process. It's getting their support. If and when it does go to referendum, getting their support on that, and then it's keeping them informed after the fact. So on an ongoing basis, they continue to feel good about it and they understand. Okay, a lot of times when it comes to communication, it's just understanding what's the simplest way to communicate. How do you put very complex terms in simple, easy to understand approaches? Okay, if people understand it, they're likely to trust it. If they're likely to trust it, they're likely to support it. Okay, it's not that anyone's doing anything wrong, but when you inadvertently complicate the information, the old saying, it's easy to make it difficult, difficult to make it easy. If you make it simple, people will trust it. If it's difficult, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's just they don't understand it, so they're unlikely to trust it. Okay, so that's what we do, and we do that on an ongoing basis so that they're likely to support you through this initiative, but also next year, the year after, 10 years from now. Referendum support, again, we've developed tools that while everything is customized for your specific district, we know there's certain ways to organize information that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. It's something that we do all the time, and just can help you, and we don't displace the district staff, we augment your current staff, okay? And we do as little or as much as you like, but just the various things of, we have a website format that you don't have to use, but it literally, or most of our clients do use it, it plugs right into their website. People click on the Manitowoc website on facilities plan or referendum. The power of the web, this is beyond me, it takes you to a different website, but it looks exactly the same, but the information is just organized in a very logical way. Okay, you have full control over it. Fact sheets, again, just what are the facts? Helping you with organizing community presentations, being there for support, helping you with what's the right way to do mailers, how do you manage social media, helping you with open houses, how do you get people there, how do we generate interest, those sorts of things. This is just an example. I believe this was in Oakfield, so kind of west of your ways, I guess, but very conservative community, very small community, conservative community, had zero debt, and just passed referendum this past April, with I believe it was 57% support. The largest win percentage, largest referendum with 16 million, but for that size community, that was large, largest like 2-to-1 ever in that community. Oh, yeah, in fact. This is not all of our experience, this is just a sampling. We picked out, there's a handful of Wisconsin and Minnesota school districts in here. Central Minnesota is it's a central school district of communities, Norwood, Young America. It's about 45 miles west of Minneapolis, out in the middle of a bunch of cornfields. And I can say that because I grew up in the ag area in southeast Wisconsin. And interesting thing about this one, they had a very aggressive athletics group. And in Minnesota, you can tie referendum questions together. So they had, out of a $45 million plan, they had, I think it was 11 or 13 million of athletic improvements in gym, football stadiums. And they tied question 2, couldn't pass until question 1 passed. And they passed both overwhelmingly with 76% support. But again, with they had a lot of deferred maintenance. They knew they needed to address that first, but they also, all the districts around them had made athletic improvements. They wanted their kids to be able to.
What's the name of the town?
Norwood, Young America. It's about 45 miles west of Minneapolis. Stevens Point, you're familiar with. Interesting thing there, they had passed their failed, their 2 or 3 previous referenda before Nexus got involved. A lot of talk here on operating levies and recurring or non-recurring. One of the things that we discovered, they knew they had these capital needs, and we got working with them and got talking with teachers and found out that for a variety of reasons, their teachers had 0 raises. I think the number was 7 years, but don't quote me, that's a long time. They found out they needed to pass an operating levy. The teacher said, no way we're supporting this unless you put an operating levy with it. So they had a plan, a total plan was 104 million. I think the referendum piece was 75 or 80 million. And they also had a $3.5 million a year recurring operating levy. They had, at the time, 0 debt, 0 operating levy. They passed both with 68% support. So pretty awesome. We're pretty excited about that. DC Everest, 71% support. They are, even though they're not a wealthy community, they have enormous community support. But they again thought there's no way we could do something this size. I'll share the amounts with you in a moment. Luxembourg Casco, interesting thing there was, just kind of a northeast of Green Bay. They were consolidating schools. And so they were going to move their middle school from Casco to the main campus in Luxembourg, which can really tear communities apart. They passed with 61% support. That was all. And interesting enough, Casco passed it. So Casco, we were even able to bring them along to say, this is the right thing for our future. Wow. Kind of interesting. Oak Creek Franklin, just south of Milwaukee. The big thing there is they had failed their 2 previous referenda. And that's a very, very conservative community. It's suburban Milwaukee. 54% is their largest win percentage ever. And there was a big auditorium as part of that. St. Charles is a district just outside of Rochester, Minnesota. They had failed their 2 previous approaches using the Nexus approach. We passed about 70% support. Bristol is in western Kenosha County, a little small K-8 school district, $22 million plan. Just passed this past April with 61% support. Wausau, obviously you know where that is. They had failed the 2 previous approaches, and we had figured out why. And interesting enough, people that were on the vote no committee in the community turned around and once they understood the plan, turned around and let vote yes. And they ultimately passed theirs at 61% support. Oakfield, I just talked about, 55% support. And then Dobrioda is a small farming community, 1,000 students in the home school district, I think it is. And probably 3,000 people in the town. And they just passed 22 million duplexes with a large percentage support there, so. With Nexus again, kind of the, what do we do? And interesting enough, if you look up the definition of Nexus, it's the center or core or connection of series of things, which my partner and I deliberately chose that name for the company because it's exactly what we do, is connect the project from start to finish. So from upfront planning, through funding, through design, construction or building, commissioning, and conserving is, weaving in that, how do we look at things on life cycle cost basis? We're one company that we pulls it all together. So there isn't any finger pointing. There's what was planned and promised up front is what's designed and built in the end. So a seamless approach, and yet all of the, as mentioned, the trade contractor work is competitive with it. The timeline that you talked about. Now, given that it's called September 1st, okay, you heard Mike Clark say that in order to be on the ballot in April of 23, the board needs to make a decision by January 24th of 23, okay? And so there's no doubt that that is a, to put a plan together, that's a compressed timeline. I'm just saying here and tell you, we are able to do it, okay? And what our approach, if you move forward with us, what our approach with it would be is we will move along, we will have you in position to make that decision, okay? If at any time along the way, you think it's moving too fast, or if we're picking up that the community isn't ready, whatever it is, we can always tap the brakes and take an off ramp, okay? But what we can't do is plan on April of 24 and then have it be, you know what, I think we could do this year and accelerate. All right, so what we're saying here is this is, you asked on a timeline, we're right here. If the board would approve our partnership development agreement, sure, we don't have a lot of time anyways, but then you've got your strategic planning effort going on now. We can do the comprehensive analysis can be done concurrent with that because there's a lot of assessment that needs to be done, but we wouldn't necessarily want to come out with solutions until the outcome of that strategic planning is known, because the two should go somewhat hand in hand, okay? But they can kind of run, the legwork can be done concurrent.
And I guess to that strategic plan timeline, I believe our strategic plan timeline, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, or Jim, we're looking at about December of this year completion. So
the central, coincidentally, the central Minnesota project, when that one was put together, their plan was done in May, and we had an inkling of what I was going to say, so we kind of had some scenarios put together. But then based on the outcome of that, the board started putting their solutions together in June, and they were ready to go by August. So, which was, and that was, given it was summer, people got other things to do, that was still a long time for them. So I'm not suggesting that it isn't a little tight, it is a little tight, but I want to assure you it is doable. Okay. And again, if anywhere along the way, anyone gets the feeling that it's too fast, this isn't right. Well, in fact, the Stevens Point project I spoke about before, they delayed their referendum a year because once the superintendent got out talking, he was new to the district, got out talking to his staff and found out that there was this chasm between their staff and the board, and it's with all salaries and operating levy and everything. He says, guys, we need to tap the brakes. So we said, we get it. The last thing that we want to do is advance a project at the wrong time. Okay, the right time to go is when you as a district are ready. It's our job to get you ready and to support you on the municipal. Okay. So there you go. That is how it would be pulled together, which would again put you in line for a January decision. Again, your options for referenda, April of 23, and then nothing until April of 22. Okay. Summarizing our partnership development approach, no upfront costs to Manitowoc Public Schools. We did a comprehensive facility assessment. We put the needs kind of in a format similar to the one that we handed out there, both in written format as well as in financial or spreadsheet format. We present the findings to this group, the board, ultimately the community, and the idea is that help you build consensus at first at staff level, board level, ultimately with the community. And again, that might be it might be a one-time plan, it might be a multi-phase plan. That's stuff we approach these things, no preconceived notions, just what's the right plan for this community. So in summary, hopefully what you've seen is we have a very comprehensive planning approach, addresses the technical, financial, as well as the communication. We really stress of developing very affordable plans. We do things right. I'll show you that in a moment. But we talk about how to make the plan affordable. You've built, based on your referendum track record here, you've built positive goodwill. At least it sure seems that way. We would want to do more research to find out really where is the community at. But on the surface, it looks that way, but there's ways for us to dive down and learn more about that. Why now? Again, having walked through your buildings, I personally have, it's been a year or two, but the needs definitely exist. They're only going to get more expensive. You asked a question before, and Mr. Clark kind of touched on it, but interest rates interest rates are have basically doubled from 2% to 4% in the last year. Okay, they're still. I remember when they were 6, 7, 8%. Okay, and Barrett has a graph that'll show. I think the historical average is between 5 and 6. So even at 4, they're still very, very attractive. They feel unattractive versus a year ago. But what you need to look at that or compare that against is inflation. And construction inflation over the last 45, 50 years has averaged 4.93%, so call it 5%. Now it's faster than the CPI because if you look at the drivers of construction, it's labor, materials, and utilities or energy. And all three of those are going up much faster than the CPI. So right now, construction inflation, if anyone's paying attention, it's completely unpredictable at the moment, but I'll tell you, because we're in the middle of it, yeah. We have seen costs go up 30, 40%. Now, that's not going to stay because private sector projects are getting stopped. But in general, people are building 15% or whatever the right number is in the budgets. In our case, again, that's not going to us because we're bidding everything out. But what we want to be able to do is we do provide a price guarantee on our projects that if we can't bring it in under budget, we bring it under budget, the difference, goes back to the district. If it comes in over budget, in writing, we will say we will redesign the project at our expense to get it back on budget. So we want it done right. Okay, I mean we're and we believe our goals are aligned that way. So, anyways, why now? Because even though if you have the needs, even with the uptick in interest rates, it's still the most cost-effective way is to address the needs. Now it benefits the kids today, but finance the money, borrow the money and pay for it over time as opposed to waiting. Waiting due to the impacts of compound inflation, you're going to fall further behind every year. This guy back here. Clearly,
I agree with that last statement very much. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not the only one. Sorry. So why Nexus? Again, we provide a single source of accountability. Okay, and it's not that there's not checks and balances. It's not design build because we do the upfront design, we competitively bid everything, and then we manage it. So there isn't. We show you all the bids. You can open them here if you want. We do have in-house expertise in all areas, as Jeff mentioned, whether it's finance, architecture, engineering, construction management commission, you name it. We have an unbiased approach because we don't. It's not like we're emphasizing one particular area. We don't care what our clients do. We know that most of our clients in school districts have needs. So we don't care if you need a building addition or a renovation, or it doesn't matter to us. So we can truly take an unbiased approach and say, what's the right solution for you? And also that helps in how we generate public support because, the Bristol plan, I'm trying to run too long here, but interesting enough, before us, I mentioned Bristol before, I should probably name my name, but they had hired another company. And it takes more of an approach at an architect and contractor. And they came back and said, they identified their issues, the district had an issue, so we think we need space and circulation problems and this and that. the company came back and said, you need to spend $35 million on all these building additions, and they weren't addressing the infrastructure. And some things happened in the district, and then I'm changing administrators, and new administrator came in and said, where are we at with the plan, and are you comfortable? And the board said, we're not comfortable. He says, well, I'd like you to meet this company Nexus. So we came and we talked to them, and we had done some quick calculations and figured out when I talk about capacity and demographics, and we said, the rates are growing. You're not growing enough to, one, based on our initial calculations, where you already have enough space, it's just not organized properly. And changing the organization is not just, rearranging the chairs. I mean, it was moving walls and everything. And basically, we were able to create a space for additional 200 students in their building. Their old plan wasn't addressing the infrastructure. At 35 million, it still wasn't addressing the infrastructure in the existing building. And our new plan came out, addressed all their needs, didn't need to add on, created the space, and there's, we walked the staff all through it. Everyone says, you guys are right, this will work. And it was 22 million, not 35 million. Addressed all their needs. That's how we do things more efficient. It's also, again, how we build support is to find the right plan. So, and how do we do that? Because we're 100% education focused. All we do all day, every day is schools. Well, 95% of it's K-12 education, a little bit technical colleges and higher education, but all we do all day, every day is schools. Vast majority is in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Business is roughly equal, and then a little bit in North Dakota. So, but when you do this all day, every day for the better part of 30 years, you start from the schools pretty well. Yeah. Various projects, I think, again, just picked out a handful, but all of these you can kind of relate to a little bit. I think the biggest testament is we have had multi-year relationships. Some of these are approaching 10 years. And all multi-phase projects, the clients, we've done project after project with them, which I think is the best testament of are you doing a good job, is to hire you again. And some of the very highly respected people, she just retired, but the superintendent of BC Everest, Dr. Chris Gilmore, highly regarded as one of the best superintendents in the state. Wausau, their chief financial officer, Bob Tess, is highly regarded as maybe the best business manager in the state. No offense.
Well, I got a lot of time left.
You're an
Time to
you got time to creep up on them. But I think you know who Bob is. I trust you probably know who Bob is. So.
Yes.
He's a living legend within the hospital. Stevens Point, again, I talked about that they didn't have success in building community support. They had changed administration. We were brought in, and none of us knew each other, and built a plan, highly successful, 107 million in that community. Kenosha Unified, Chris's counterpart there at Finnemore, again, highly regarded. He's highly regarded nationally, and he's a staunch supporter of Nexus. We do a ton of work for him. And Oak Creek Franklin, again, very conservative community. And we're in the process of our third phase work with them. We're just in the development phase right now. So all decent sized projects, and our goal is to have clients for life.
That's a question for you. It's not a joke, but it's going to come off as a joke. I really don't. There's all these companies that are good at going for and having good success rates at going for referendums and pulling money from the public. Is there any companies out there, or do you guys have a way of going upwards and getting at this $5 billion surplus that Wisconsin is sitting on? And the reason why I say that is because they're going to claim that it's just they're doing such a great job right now. Look, we got a surplus. Your surplus means garbage to me when the rest of us are suffering down here. That's the way I look at the administration right now going on in Wisconsin. And it just irritates me that they're going to claim all this fantastic credit for having the surplus, which means nothing when the rest of us are starving. It's just like I've seen it before in communist Romania and whatever else that was going on back in the day, where everybody's sitting on this fat stack of cash while we're all in the breadlines. And that's kind of how I see it right now, and it bothers the heck out of me. And it really makes me sick to my stomach that right now we're in this point in time where we're looking at going for referendums and taking more money from taxpayers, which I am one of them, struggling. And, and they're sitting on a fat stack of cash. So I don't know. I know where we're going with this. It's just frustrating with me, and I'm not going to let that subject go.
For what it's worth, I certainly can't get into the politics.
Sure.
Well, the country myself there. I can't get into politics over here. I am very active politically in both states. In Minnesota, I drove legislation back around the year 2000, which is basically drives how their schools are funded today. I drove similar legislation here in the state of Wisconsin about 10 years ago, and maintained personal friendships with many of our legislators, and have had many sidebar conversations. I get called for private consultations to say, how do we do this? What do we do? What do you think about this? And so, just so you're aware, we are involved and we are trying, but
What do you
we are-
suggest for us to do to help? Because I'm already, getting emails ready. I'm gonna start letting emails fly because I just.
I mean, it is your local legislators. I should know this. I don't know who your local legislators are.
Paul Tittle, Chase Hartwell, those two probably.
They do, truthfully, they do listen. Doesn't mean that they can always act on it, but talking to them, they do listen. I've sat in countless meetings where they're pulling up, private meetings, they're pulling up emails. I'm hearing this, and so it does matter to talk to them. That's most important. Second thing is working like as a school board, working with WASB, the Wisconsin School Board Association. They are, they are respected in the Capitol, and when consistent messages are coming, grassroots messages statewide, it does matter. Again, now we're in very challenging times in the state of Wisconsin right now. I mean, it's
Well, why? How is it challenging when we're sitting on a gigantic pile of cash?
that is where I have a foot in 2 states, and I'm from Wisconsin. I live in Milwaukee. But having worked in both states for a long time, I will say there's a ton of similarities between the two, but politically and with the stark contrast. It is what it is. And so I don't have a good answer for you, but I will say that, talking, getting involved, it does have an impact. Sometimes it takes a while, and it's frustrating. But I think there's a growing sense there. If you look at it statewide, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but operating levies, you heard Mike Clark say how they are going up and up and up. And I remember when Governor Walker said in 2010, said, we're going to give you local control. We're going to have local control. And I heard the same thing with Governor Pawlenty, a Republican over in the state of Minnesota back in 2000, almost like verbatim. And I said, what he's saying is if you want more money, appeal to your local taxpayers. And in Minnesota back in the year 2000, 5% of districts had operating levies, and they were known as excess operating levies. Now 95% of districts have them. They're standard operating procedure. Wisconsin is going the same way. I think, like I said, like 75% of districts now. I mean, but if you look at where the communities are at, operating levies, which explain this to your administration, maybe a simple way. Sometimes it's confusing. I do this every day, but bond referendums, bonds are for buildings, right? Levies are for learning. That's okay. So yeah. At the end of the day, they're coming out of this money comes from taxpayers, but they're two different referenda, okay? And operating levies for learning, are generally harder to pass because people want to get stuff, they want bricks and mortar.
Sure.
Right or wrong, operating levies are passing at a rate, I believe it's over 80% right now. And I don't quote me on that, but I believe it's up there. And it's, there's a lot of talk that it's because our communities are saying we need to fund our schools. We have to do it. And I got to think people, but that's going to shift toward, if the state has money, why are we going to our local people? So again, it's not, I'm just reading the tea leaves. Boy, I'm hearing people like yourself more and more. So for what it's worth, we are involved. We don't have a crystal ball in this one, but we're trying. Right.
All right, I'm gonna get you off that subject.
Oh, yes.
I'm hungry, so I'm.
Yeah, sorry. I get too passionate about this.
Oh, like it is. So my 2 questions are, so you brought up before that you've been in a partnership with the MPSD for quite a while now. So I'm wondering, and you said too that you walked through our buildings in the last year or 2. So I'm wondering, has part of this assessment already been accomplished? Is it in part, has it been done already?
Yes and no, and not to avoid your question, but the preliminary walkthrough is kind of a cursory study, gives us an idea of just what's the general state of the state.
Okay.
Okay, and we have done that. The detailed analysis is a very comprehensive look at things where we're literally going to look at every system and subsystem and be putting budgets to everything, reliable budgets. That work has not been done, but we have a general idea of the district's facilities.
Okay, and then my second question, not really related at all, it's financial, is what is your construction management fee, like percentage?
Yeah, those can vary depending on the project, but you'll see ranges anywhere from call it, 1.5%, 1.75% to 2.25%, 2.5%, kind of in that range, depending on the size of the project.
Okay.
So those, everything that we do is at market rates. I mean, we won't be the cheapest. We certainly won't be the most expensive, kind of right down the middle, but they generally will fall into that 1.5% to 2.5% range, plus or minus.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other, oh, Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, did I hear something about, I thought you mentioned something about some sort of a guarantee?
Yeah.
Can you help me understand that again?
Sure. What I was talking about is, we talked about that we can identify projects that pay for themselves. Okay? So we would identify what sort of budget reducing savings. So are there utility savings, utilities in terms of gas, electricity, fuel oil? Are there operations and maintenance savings that, and by budget reducing, I'm talking about the operations and maintenance savings would be money that Chris is spending on outside purchase goods and services, but I'm not talking about the productivity of his staff because most school districts are short-staffed anyways. Okay, so as long as they're still in payroll, and I expect they would be, we're just looking at what are you spending on either paying utilities or outside service vendors. We would be able to dial that in very precisely, okay? And we would be able to guarantee what those savings are on an annual basis. And the length of that guarantee would run for the length of the financing. So whether that's 10, 15, 20 years. So we would ensure that you have, that if you don't realize the savings, we're cutting a check for the shortfall for the difference.
So how do you measure that?
On the utility side, there's a couple of different ways. You can look at actual utility bills, but that's very, with the varying use of schools, it's very doable, but it's expensive, doesn't make a lot of sense. We're typically looking at literally measuring, like simple sort of lighting. If we take the lighting out, we'll measure the current draw before. Put the lighting, if you go into, say, T8s to LEDs, maybe you're relamping, if it's overlit, underlit, whatever, and measuring the current draw afterwards and showing that you're actually going to have a decrease. And then that's done that's like it's simple, so all sorts of improvements like that around the district. Makes sense?
And we have,
You're converting that reduction in energy consumption based on utility rates. You multiply the two, you'll get the dollar savings.
So could you tell us, once you do your assessment, how much you could save on the front end for projects like that?
Yeah, definitely.
and we have one of those with you right now as well,
we do.
right?
We have synergistic, which is looking at behavioral type of thing, not so much like the facility.
Okay,
If he says, we're gonna do this facility project that'll save you money, that's a little bit different than what synergistic is doing.
okay.
And Angela can talk a little bit more, because,
And synergistic works too with, as you engage in construction projects, they will help, adjust things and sort of modify things to work with that. So we have a lot of data, just through utility bills and stuff that's easily accessible, that we'd be able to provide.
so for example, I'll give you a quick snippet of the different players working together. So what Nexus is doing, our pool Dectron unit at the high school, which will help save us some energy, focus on energy, work with them to do their number crunching to give us some incentive to do that. Synergistic is involved with what points we're looking at on the computer when we run the equipment.
Okay.
So all of them are in concert together to look at what's our best bang for our buck. And so we got that type of relationship going when we do this. It's a very small little drop in the bucket from what we have, but that is how that stuff helps work together, try to figure things out.
Yeah, so anything just in simple terms, we'd be looking more at the capital improvements and the direct impact of that as opposed to the operating side.
Got it.
Matt?
What contractual agreements do we have with you right now?
Right now, I believe it's just on the pool unit, correct?
Correct.
So we provided basically plan, design, construction management services, commissioning for that pool unit. I believe that's it.
That's it. Yes.
Oh, and then
And the
we,
playground.
I'm sorry, and then the playground equipment, which, you know, due to bid timing, came in over budget, that's gonna be rebid, I think, later this fall.
Right.
So, same thing, we provided, in simple terms, called design and construction management services for those two specific projects.
Previous to those two projects, what have you done for the district as well? In the last 5 years?
That's it.
Yeah, I think that's it, yeah.
I will give you a little bit of, so when I said I ran out of money to do more studies,
Yeah.
they were walking through the buildings and we said, well, you know, we don't want to just, we could do the study, but we'd like to see what needs you have. So we started talking with Mr. Holzman and Ken Mishler about, are we at a point where we want to do referendum? Are we, you know, we started to dip our toes into this kind of a conversation. So I did run out of money to just say, look, I don't know if we're ready to commit to this type of conversation, but I want this information because we got 1 million square feet. We don't really have very good information on the age, you know, and obsolescence of some of our equipment. So that's kind of where that's where it kind of ended that conversation. So that was their history of walking through to get a feel, and why, Kathy, that there was nothing done, but they've I think you've scanned a bunch of our blueprints and we were, you know, looking at some of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of to flesh that out and to answer your question is didn't have any, you know, real project needs to do this. We did with the Dectron unit, which we came in under budget by $137,000, I think it was. So that was great. And we used some of that money to fast track that project to get it in so that the swimmers didn't lose time to swim. They only lost 2 days. So, yeah, that was the.
Is that project done now, Chris?
Well, they're grinding on the guys to get it right in this commissioning part, which is near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
That, yes, it's done. They're swimming. There's some final things that the trades are making sure it operates the way it's supposed to.
Okay.
Yeah. But by and large, it's pretty much done. Yeah.
So one last, well, maybe not one last, but as far as follow-up afterwards, it's my understanding you continue the partnership beyond. And what does follow-up for project look like as far as, I mean, it sounded like you go back into to ensure that it's done properly and, you know, that the community's happy, et cetera. What does that look like? What is that?
Yeah, great question. A number of different things here. One is the immediate follow-up is we go through and commission all of the equipment to make sure that it's working the way it's supposed to, which sounds like, well, isn't that standard? And then you get in commercial construction projects, especially schoolwork, and the answer is no. Contractors, unfortunately, want to get off-site as fast as possible. We go through and test everything to make sure that it's working properly the way it was designed. Okay, so by the time everyone leaves, before things are out of warranty, we know that it's working. And literally through the years, we have found like big air handling fans spinning backwards, and people are like, it's not like you can really see this if you don't know what you're looking at. People are like, you know, that unit, it's never, it's not large enough. It's always too hot or too cold in here, and well, if just two wires were across this and spinning backwards, it would be for 50 years. And spent the other way, it'll increase the output by like 70%. Heating coils, cooling coils, this is something I've learned. They can be piped top to bottom or bottom to top, whatever. But the way the coil is designed, if the pipes get reversed and it's where the coil is flipped, so it looks the same, you wouldn't think it'd matter. If the water flows through it in the opposite direction it's supposed to, it'll reduce the capacity by 40%. Okay, and then once that's in and people leave, it's very, very difficult to find unless we've not found it many times. So, you know, all that type of stuff is tested. Okay. So that's the immediate. On an ongoing basis, it kind of depends on what the client needs. Do we set up the plan as a multi-year or as a multi-phase approach? So are we working with them on still the highest priority needs? I mentioned Oak Creek, where there was something that they knew that they were going to have some eventual growth. And they also want to build an aquatic center potentially. But they knew they couldn't fit in the last referendum. So we're now starting on that part of it, and the growth is coming. So they're looking at a phase 2. So we're working with them on that. Communications wise, it's just, we're always there to help support the district's communications. I don't know if you have a separate communication person, but to support them. Our communications people tend to build good relationships with them, and they're always available to say, how can we help you? Hey, we created a new piece, maybe you want to use it for your district, that sort of thing on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything further to add or ask regarding the discussion?
It's a lot to digest.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.
We've taken a lot of your time on a warm August night, so thank you. Sincerely appreciate it. Hopefully it was helpful. And we will follow up and provide you with some electronic follow-up to the things we talked about tonight. And the key is just not to rush all. We showed you the timeline. Just recognize that you do have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done. It's September 1st.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, everybody.
So is this meeting?
So moving along, there was one thing that I did need to make note of that was mentioned by Angela, just for you guys all to be aware of. The budget and finance meeting will be getting moved from the 7th to the 14th. That will be at 5:30. Is this okay with the committee? Is that okay with you?
I got something going on that night.
Okay. We will be doing a to be determined then for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Angela and I will be discussing, and I'll pump out, if you want to, we'll pump out some dates to maybe get that back in line. Do understand the importance of making sure that we have continual meeting, especially around this time of year. That being said, given what we just sat through and discussed, if you note on the agenda, there is not an action item. It was simply for information and discussion. However, obviously, as you had heard from, our vendors, time is of the essence. I guess I would like to ask this group if we are interested in what we would be interested in for those next steps. There's no action to this agenda right now, so obviously nothing can be transpiring tonight. But are we looking to meet again? Do we want to kick this off to the general? What?
We have a regular meeting coming up. I would put it on there. That's my opinion.
We're ready yet for that?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm a little bit stunned with this.
Sure,
I mean,
and you're gonna.
Nobody's ever talked about like a big ass referendum and an overall comprehensive project to bring maintenance up to what it ought to be. I mean, both those things are kind of good ideas, but geez, I'd like to see a demonstration of the need before we start talking about the methods.
So, I mean, to that though, how are we going to demonstrate need? I would be wondering how we're gonna find need. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, so I've reviewed some of Chris, you have the binders of the need that he pointed out for roofing and tuck pointing. And so roofing and tuck pointing had been addressed already by Nexus. So the need for roofing and tuck pointing is proven. So that's something we have proven through data that there's a need for. Now, obviously, we haven't had them go through all the buildings for everything, but we do have some information of where we're at for need. So I would start with that need, obviously.
We've got the problem with Washington Jr.
You've seen Washington, you saw Wilson, you saw Lincoln. Lincoln, I was told the other day, we talked about that. I mean, so
I would like to do a needs assessment first.
Well, isn't that kind of what we're looking to do?
This is a needs assessment, I think.
I mean, sort of, but it's kind of a creeping agenda.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Could we have Chris and Matt, if you guys would present that to the board on our next meeting, what are some of the foreseeable needs for our buildings? You may not have dollars, but just can give us ideas.
There's
because-
dollars in those things too.
Well, because
No, there are,
truthfully,
yeah,
like,
but they're-
Chris,
they're
you have
fine.
not presented this kind of stuff to the board before. You know, we've dealt with a lot of other things. So it is kind of seemingly, at least for those of us not on the Building and Grounds Committee, kind of coming out of nowhere. And we are talking about a lot of money and a lot of buildings.
Let's
So
see.
if we could have some kind of
Yeah.
presentation.
I know Angela and I and Jim have been working on the requirement for Fund 46, which is that kitty for capital improvements.
Right.
Okay.
In order to have that, you gotta have a plan. Well, you know, and I own, the last 7 years I've been here, I've had different strategies of demonstrating need. Well, we finally put it together. And we've got Lisa Sinkin, so I'll let you talk about the document that will help us with 146, which is a small snapshot of the big picture.
That
I
would be
mean,
helpful.
that might be helpful too as well, but I also think physically bring those things here so they can see that. There is a lot of pictures. That's a lot of money invested. I don't know how much we pay for those things, like an exorbitant amount of money for somebody to come and make these assessments. Bring them here and let these people look at that. That's what I want. I would move that we.
I've only been able to review them for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. That is a
That
sales
part is
pitch.
kind of-
No, I'm reframed. We just presented a sales pitch for a catch-all to try to solve
Right,
district
exactly,
problems.
right.
And so what I need is, I need the director of buildings and grounds to give presentations to the board so that we're informed to make decisions for the betterment of the district. And we don't have that.
Right.
And that's the problem right now. So I thank those people there, but I'm not gonna talk in front of them about stuff we need to talk about right now. So like,
Right.
and I understand, and Carrie and me are on 100% same page here.
I said, boy, these guys are forever. I mean, you know, you sign a contract with these guys. I mean, this stuff is just, I mean, anybody that's owned a building knows that maintenance is a kind of a constant thing, isn't it?
Right.
So,
First of all, I think
I would-
we've talked about doing this in, the bulk of the work needs to happen in a committee. This is a runaway train if you try to bring this to a general session, in my opinion.
I think we're not ready for that.
The
right now.
recommendation needs to
Yeah.
come from the committee that says that we already have a plan, and this is year 2, 3, 4, 5, or we say that, yeah, maybe we spent a lot of money on this document, but how old is it? And is it comprehensive enough?
Well,
Because that's the thing that I don't know, is that, and I would say it's probably beyond 7 years of Chris. We've been kicking this can down the road, and it doesn't matter where we point a finger. But the bottom line is, I am not convinced to go out to our community and say, we need a referendum
for everything.
for what?
Yeah, right, no.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so someone needs to create that plan. And do we think we have expertise in-house, nothing against Chris, but to do what these people can
No.
do?
I
No, I don't.
Well, nobody's got that.
I'll just
I mean,
point out,
no
they're not
school
charging
district's
anything
got
here,
that.
or at least that last.
Right. No, this is a great, I think this is great.
So that's what I'm saying is, I mean, I'm with Carrie in that, yes, I know we're on this time crunch, but we need to be very strategic.
We can't rush this. I mean, we have to
About
be thorough
this.
about this, yeah.
So,
And,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I guess, so I'm looking at it as one of the big things for me was, and I talked to Baird about it, I talked to both Nexus and CISA 10 on this, is our cost of opportunity. Right now, we all know that inflation is going to be rising. We all know that expenses are going up. Nothing is going down. So we have an opportunity to either act now and maybe pay X amount, or kick it down the road some more where we have further issue and then we're playing X plus whatever inflation decides. So at some point, we got to make a decision here of which direction we're going to go. We all have seen the way those schools look. They look like they need some improvement.
Some of them do,
And there's some things that are very concerning. I didn't want to pay my quarter. But there's some things that are very concerning, even on the safety. We We had a ceiling collapse on a student a couple years ago.
Yeah.
When are we gonna take on this stuff?
Yeah.
This needs to be addressed, and I feel like I'm in a bureaucracy here. I apologize to this community, but we really need to just, I don't think, and no
Nobody
offense,
says that we were
I know,
disinterested.
but I mean, no offense to what you've provided in the past. But I don't feel it's comprehensive enough. I feel it's slightly outdated, and I think we need to get a more accurate picture right now. So I'll just,
Just to add on to that, I like the fact, oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, just to bring a little clarity on the ceiling plow, for sure, not on a student, but I
That's
just wanna
insurance.
make sure, just, cause that would be and I wasn't here then, Chris was there to witness that, and, several points that I just wanted to be brief on is that we do have several options, but the interest rates is something to keep in mind, because right now, like a year later or two later, is if we would go out to Fund 39, we might have like 1% or 2% higher. So it's just something to keep in mind. It shouldn't be a deciding factor necessarily, but there's savings in that. I'll send you a PDF of the slideshows that they had. And the goal always is with the finance when you have multiple debts, and if you have like Fund 39 and along with Fund 10 and 38, Fund 39, you set your levy, like you're required to set it at a certain amount, but you can also, when you have that Fund 39 debt, you can adjust your levy you can keep it steady, and you can control your mill rates a little bit. It's gonna dip down lower again this year, and we have no way to control that. It's just, that's just where it's gonna be.
Honestly, the comment, like, if we're gonna do a referendum, we have to present it in language that people understand.
Sure.
Then vote. We just had a barrage of information. I mean, the Baird stuff was like, Jesus,
Yeah.
I may be slow-witted, but I'd have to study a little bit.
And we
But let me just say this, because I'd be interested in knowing what the three of you talked about.
Sure.
Before we did this meeting. Because obviously you've talked about it, you're aware of some stuff that needs to be done. This is sort of like prepping the committees here to do the right thing.
Yes.
So I want to know what you want to prep us for.
Sure.
I agree. Thank you.
And we also have like the work that's been done before, though we haven't shared it through committee and through board in the past. Through that Fund 46 requirements, we will have that where I could send the draft if it's okay, if that would help to give you like just to especially on the foot of this presentation. And that has about $40 million worth of total improvement needs in it.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to do this all by email. I'd like to
And have
get this
more
group
follow-up
back
meetings.
together
Mhm.
and talk in everybody's language and, and say, oh, okay, I understand now.
Well,
And I'm all in favor of like not seeing the infrastructure crumble. I mean, I'm really truly want to maintain.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does.
No.
I think what I'd like to see though is, does it make sense that Buildings and Grounds reviews all the information that we have and lets us know what they think our next step should be? We either go with Nexus, we go with CISA, we hate all of them. We do what we have now. We do the 40,000. I guess that's where I would suggest that the next step.
Okay, yeah, well, we haven't done that step yet, but that's a really good step, and I think that's a necessary thing before we proceed any further.
Tony, did you have something?
Yeah, I think really the question is, do we have a clear picture with what we have now to assess the conditions and costs? And based off what I heard, I think the answer to that is we don't really know. We got like
We don't know.
$40 to $100 million range, right? $40 million to $100 million range. So here's my thinking on it. You guys can chime in if you disagree, but we have a group that's worked with us, Nexus, that has offered to do a lot of this work basically for nothing, right? Or at least on the front end, they're not going to charge us anything. So I'd like to, learn more about what that looks like. What are we on the hook for if they do that and we don't do anything? But that to me seems like a pretty appealing offer. If they could make the case for us do a lot of this legwork, and then we'll see where it goes. You know, I guess, and maybe you know the answer to that or not, but is there, if we say, hey, do this study, like, are we signing a contract to use them for whatever we do later, I'm guessing? It's-
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
We'll commit to the process.
It kind of,
Think of it as a process.
I kind
Yeah.
of think that the free part sounds enticing, right? But a little too good to be true. Like, you know that's built in there somehow, right? And
Oh,
like,
yeah,
and
they're gonna
basically,
go
that's
to
the
the
way it's
banks
built in,
anyway.
is saying, we're contracting with you, so eventually you're getting all that.
Well, let's assess what that looks like.
So
And I
let's see
think-
which is better.
Yeah. Right, and I think what everyone's saying is we don't have a clear picture, right?
Right.
And so I think we can all agree on that, so let's make
That's
that picture as clear as we can, and then, you know, figure out our path forward.
I'll speak to that if you'd like. That's a great idea, however, it's a rabbit hole, and when you go down the rabbit hole, they're very good at their job, and they do a very good job probably at what they do. However, they're going to justify the needs of the need, because we have the need, and then they're gonna build in the things that we want, or the things that the district would like, and it's gonna be a beautiful, pretty bowl of $45 million, and then we're gonna be the salesman for our constituents.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. Now, I'm completely okay with that if we are there, but I don't think we're there yet to be making those decisions as a board to that task at the moment. I would like to see us really get the review, what Stacy just said, we need to review a little more, and maybe we could put some fires out that are kind of blazing right now, instead of jumping forward into a
Comprehensive
huge
plan, yeah.
commitment. But I'm okay with the huge commitment when we're ready for it. Like, I'll do my due diligence, we'll be informed, inform our community. However, I don't think that's the moment we should be jumping right now, because we have a lot of things that are unstable. And inflation is obviously one of them, which 3 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about inflation because there wasn't. But I'm saying now we should kind of be ready to have more options instead of, and I understand your information, that's a great idea. However, it's a one-way street. It doesn't come back from
You
there.
wanna look before you leave, I got it.
But it's a good idea to get an assessment, but then that's what we're gonna go with. And maybe that's a great idea, maybe that's what we should
Well,
do.
yeah, then maybe to Stacy's point, you guys should really review everything we have, you know, go through all 10,000 pages or whatever we got, and let us know what you guys think.
Yeah, well, we need, no, you're right. We need a report.
Tony's like, I'm not
We
joking.
need a report.
So Jane,
Well, I was, you know, the one thing I sensed, I mean, I didn't have a good handle where we're going up. I only heard referendum in April. I had no way to build context around that, and I felt I had to open up the conversation today, you know, by bringing people, you know, to have something about here to where are we?
Yeah.
You know, to get this conversation on the table.
Well, yeah.
So that we can.
Rich, when you
I
talk
think that was a great thing to
When
do.
you talk about how did this come to be, right?
Right.
It's that if someone needs to convince me I'm not against referendums,
Oh, no.
but someone needs to convince me that that's what we need and what we're gonna use it for.
Now, the other thing that we found out was, you know, stepping back, is we could follow a similar process that we've done in the past, kind of a short-term solution, as we're doing a deeper assessment or how, I mean, so there are options here
Right.
still, but at least we can make an informed decision about that.
I think
Because we could look at something that could be off the wall big, and we'll feel really informed, even though we're committing to resources to a particular company, when there could be other options.
Right.
You know, but clearly, you know, I think a lot of what we've done is kick things down the road without proper context to be able to figure out how to prioritize this.
Right.
But a lot of schools use outside sources. I mean, it's just that we've not had this discussion, you know, where we feel like we somewhat have our arms around the condition of our buildings, you know, by the very nature of what we put on the table.
I think we're at step one. You know, I think this meeting was a good and important thing to do.
Yeah.
Colin and I have been on buildings and grounds for 2 years.
We
and
have, yeah.
Everything has been done piecemeal. It's like, okay, there's this now, you know, there's the Jefferson schoolyard. So we'll look at that, and we don't talk about anything in the big overall, like, So, the job of the committee has been to make a report that we really need to do something on Jefferson Schoolyard, so vote yes for that. But we haven't approached it in any systematic way. And I think that we need to begin to approach it that way and then say, oh, Jesus, this is too big for us. Let's get Nexus or CISA 10 to come and do this needs assessment here. And I think that there's 3 steps there. The next time we meet, we should be talking about, roofs, and we should be talking about, a whole lot of things, like, the Washington.
But
The
but
Washington
the problem with that
building
is,
thing.
you dump in money to this 40 million, right? And then our comprehensive shows us that, you know what, this school, we shouldn't even be investing any money in it.
Yeah.
Because of
right,
X,
right.
Y, or Z.
No, I'm
Or-
not saying that, I'm just saying that we familiarize ourselves with the overview before we then say, all right, let's get somebody to do the professional stuff.
Well, let's get it over.
Okay, so,
Sorry.
no, not sorry at all. I appreciate the sentiments and statements, but, so, obviously, we all understand there is some need, right? So with there being some need, what is our next step for that need? I know, Matt, you had said, that you didn't feel that there was, we're not at that, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but a comprehensive approach just yet. That maybe and it sounds like, Carrie, you want a little bit more information yet.
A lot more.
It sounds like Stacy wants it put into committee, and I'm not speaking for you guys, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
What would be our next steps for this? Because right now, my understanding of what we were going to do here is either decide one or the other.
Right.
And let them handle those next steps in finding out what we need. So maybe I'm just mistaken, and I'd like to know what we want to do.
So, I'll speak. So what I believe is that we need to have roofs that don't decay our buildings worse. So if we have a roofing issue, it should be established first, unless the need of the district oversees that we don't need a roof on that building anymore. So if we know that we're gonna have that building, then we should fix the roof. That's
Agreed.
number one, okay? And that's how you prioritize it. And then after that, obviously, we have to determine if we're decaying the structure of the building. So brick and mortar, if we're losing bricks or if we're losing windows, which this has been addressed with previous boards already. It just, obviously now it's compounded further and further.
Right.
But I do agree that we need a systemic, a full overview. However, maybe right now is not quite the best time for that endeavor because of the turmoil or the stability of the whole system right now. So like, I would like to kind of try to make sure I'm ready for a storm. So I want to make sure our properties are not going down in value, but they're safe. And so that's where I'm kind of at. But I understand if we do a full view of everything, then we can put it in a bowl and we can say, hey, this is what we need. But I don't feel comfortable telling my constituents that we should vote for something until I know that we can. And that's what they do. That's what the whole support of what they're trying to say.
And some of that wasn't saying that we would go out for a big thing. It could be small parts.
Yeah, you can customize what their
But
plan
there
is.
is a cost and you do get locked into, and that's why I wanted to provide different perspectives, besides what we can do in-house. What are those? And they're obviously selling their service. They're obviously being consumed.
Right.
And I felt like, our committee members have had some good understanding, but I still felt like we didn't have enough of everybody on the same page about how we are proceeding. And I kept hearing referendum in April possible. And I just, I needed to make sure that I elevated the level of engagement to get us more effective at the committee level, maybe.
And I understand Angela's point about the financial side of it, like, so we're in a financial situation where we're going to need to get money somewhere. So if we present a solution to the problems of our facilities and tie it into a referendum to help us operate or reoccurring or non-reoccurring. So I understand her job of trying to kind of cohesively bring us together.
Okay,
I'm not in that point right now where
So-
we can make that
since
decision.
raising hands doesn't work, I'm just.
Go
start
ahead,
talking.
yeah.
So here's the deal. I move that since you guys moved that financial committee meeting
That's
a week later to the 14th.
Yeah.
We make that another joint meeting. In the meantime, we can get together with building
Yeah.
and grounds and come up with something as far as what we wanted to make things a little bit more clear. We can discuss with Chris as well and try to get you guys up to date as far as we were with the building and grounds. That's our next steps, I think.
Good idea.
So that, that next meeting is, that has not been determined yet, so it's right now.
Oh, yeah, we're waiting on dates, but whatever
the
date it may
seventh, he's saying
be.
the seventh, I think. You're saying like next week we were gonna meet.
Right, and you
the
guys are
only-
moving that.
Yeah, and we just, I wanted to have a little bit more time to bring the next
Sure.
piece of the budget. So
Whatever
it's like
that
now
means,
is the time to.
Doesn't matter.
Sure.
Point is, whenever you do decide that meeting, let's make that a joint meeting. In between now and then, we can get together as building and grounds and figure out a way to make this a little bit more clearly. Hopefully, we can come to a point to where we're all in a position where, yeah, let's make a decision on whether or not to go with this, that, or the other thing, whatever.
Okay, I'd like to have
Just
a building
go ahead.
grounds committee.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, and I already mentioned next Wednesday.
Sure.
At 5:00, if that works for you guys.
Works for me.
Mhm.
I didn't ask Chris about his schedule.
Good.
We're not doing finance and budget at that time anymore. That's when that originally was.
I don't know what the date of next Wednesday is.
The seventh.
Well,
Yeah,
whatever.
so it is
We'll
this,
do our building and grounds.
We have our
there.
Okay,
executive
let's do that.
we have exec.
And we'll put, what we'll put on the agenda is key fob policy.
Sure.
I have some stuff to send you. The lot on South 8th Street, we have to kind of check that off the list, one way or the other. And I got an email that dealt with kind of an urgency about roofs.
Okay.
But I would like to then talk about, among ourselves, how to proceed now to take care of
I
the longer,
agree.
bigger
I
picture.
think that's our next steps.
All right,
Okay?
We're gonna get lost in the pigeonhole talking about
that's fine. So,
the field roofs.
so that being said, there's a budget, or there's a buildings and grounds Wednesday the 7th at 5 PM. Exec is meeting that day, right? But
Oh, that's
we're meeting
right.
later, so that's fine. We'll I think we're at.
6, I think.
Yeah,
aren't you?
it was supposed to be at.
5:30. It's on my calendar.
It's-
Are we not having a budget meeting next week?
It's so
Yeah,
what
that's the one that we're gonna cancel that one and find a time the next week. So if you can provide some times, we can sort of,
Yeah.
a time the following week.
You got something going on.
So that was supposed to be, anyway, so that the execs were always lined up to be after finance, which isn't meeting that week. So the three of us, right, should we just decide
That's our next full board.
what do you want to do there, Prez?
Or what about, could they meet earlier and then we can still keep our 5:30 time?
Would you guys be all right with that?
Can
Karen?
buildings and grounds meet earlier
I don't
than,
know.
and be done by
Fitz is
5:30?
gonna work.
Oh, Fitz is
Yeah.
gonna work.
4:30, I guess. That's
Well,
not
we can
enough
always
time.
meet at the building and grounds place too. It doesn't have to be here.
No, we should be at, but anyways, but yeah, 4:30 is probably,
Okay.
an hour's not enough time.
Well, actually, it doesn't, you're not gonna do a joint meeting, that's just them.
We're not,
Is that
no.
right?
We're separate.
Okay,
They're
so
buildings, grounds, we're
4:30.
exec. We could be,
Oh, so it doesn't matter.
We don't-
So,
yeah.
no.
it's
September
completely fine.
7th, okay?
Doesn't matter.
No, it does not matter.
And so the
So-
board meeting is what?
But so that was just to answer. So then what you guys are gonna be doing is you guys are discussing on buildings and grounds, what we just transpired here.
Right, yeah.
We'll follow up. Angela, do you have any objection to the 14th being a joint one? Would that be all right?
I think that's when Tony was in.
Tony
Well,
said-
I mean, whatever that next finance meeting.
Correct, that we do it as a joint meeting while
Would you
we
be
budget and a revisit of this material as
Would you be
well.
okay with that?
13th, you said you can do?
15th, would that work? 15th?
15th, let me look at my,
We have a board meeting.
Is it Thursday?
That's a
Tuesday,
Thursday.
The 13th, yeah, we do have a board meeting.
I can make the 15th work later, after 4.
So are we doing 4:30? Is that what I heard?
4:30, yeah, this,
On Wednesday.
4:30 to
7th.
6?
I can't do that. I
Yeah,
can't do that.
probably.
I gotta take my kid to
We're not
dance
gonna
that
get it
day.
done in an hour.
On the 15th?
we're not gonna get it
Can't
done.
do
now.
15, so
Yeah.
we'll revisit.
4:30.
What we'll do,
The 6th,
but
yeah,
to
please.
answer the question, like I said, we gotta figure out the the
Yes.
date, but to answer the question, we can do a joint for that meeting, that next finance meeting, is that correct?
Sure, that would
Okay,
not be a problem.
So then that's what the game plan would be. Does anybody have any objections or conflicts with that?
We're thinking in a joint meeting?
Yeah,
I never knew that.
all right.
Just tell me when to come.
When are we doing the joint meeting? Sorry.
We have to determine that.
Okay,
So,
okay, that's
So
what I
buildings
thought.
and grounds is gonna meet on the 7th
correct.
individually, then we're
Yeah.
gonna meet together at the next one, so make sure I
The
understand
next
this.
one, yeah.
And then after that joins, we'll do just pure finance budget.
Yep,
Got
okay.
Can
Rock
I,
and roll.
so are we not doing the
No.
15th then, or?
No,
No.
15, can't do 15.
Thank you, James, for bringing us together, because these conversations have to happen. However, I'm sorry, Kathy, that the presentations have to be 3 hours before we actually talk. So what I'm saying is this is a part of, we're being constructive to try
Yeah.
to solve problems,
Yeah.
but problems take time to solve. So,
Oh, I know.
so thank you for being here, and I'm sorry, it's just, we have to have these conversations, because the budget side of it is how we're gonna pay for any of it. So we, that's where we're intertwined. So like, to get anything really done, we need money, and we need to, so we have to kind of plan for it. So that's why this is very cumbersome. Well, I'm apologizing because it's taking time.
We have a
I
motion,
know, but we're all
Uh,
here.
we have a motion to adjourn.
Oh.
Do we have a second?
Wait,
I'm happy.
I was just gonna make a suggestion
Who,
before.
who made the motion?
Well, do we, motion to adjourn, we have a motion on the floor, so can we get a second?
Nobody seconded it.
Nobody
Yeah.
seconded, all
I'll
right.
second.
Motion
Let's
failed, go
settle
ahead,
up.
sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when you guys get together at the building and grounds, I think you guys should find out what's the minimum commitment if we engage in that firm that, this Nexus, to do the free assessment or whatever, or the free upfront assessment. What's the minimum, commitment that we have to spend with them,
Yeah, okay.
if any? I think that would be a good question to ask if we don't know.
Well, he said nothing, but we would be required to do the contractual work with them.
Yeah, I think we gotta look at it.
That's
But
what
the
he
fee
said.
sounded reasonable, right? So it's like 1.5% to 2.5%. So I'm just saying, if it's at market, like, to me, that's just a no-brainer. Like, if they're good and they're doing work everywhere, like, I don't know. I mean, unless you guys want to
Well,
reinvent
they'll
the
just-
wheel.
They'll discuss that, we'll bring it back on, is that okay, can we just bring that back?
Put it in an email
Yeah.
format.
I think you have to
Alright.
reference check and everything else. I mean, that's just like when we,
Yeah.
first superintendent, not just like, ooh, that sounds like the best deal.
Yeah, we have,
Yeah,
we have client
we
references.
need to do some of that, so.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'm just saying, it's good value, but they're doing a lot of legwork up front. And,
Yeah.
If we're gonna spend the money anyway, it's not like we're gonna have to do stuff anyway.
And you can customize the plan too, it sounded like too, so.
We can't even
Not
make a
locked in.
decision tonight because.
Correct.
I'm not suggesting we make a decision tonight, I'm just asking them to figure that out, so that when we meet again, we could at least understand the full picture.
All right, so is
That's
there
it.
anything more?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
I second it.
It's
Oh,
been
now you're gonna
seconded.
second it.
Any discussion?
You seconded it? You want to
I
second?
negative second it.
I do have somebody ask you.
Anybody all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No, I think,
Now
We're
wait,
adjourned.
while we're still being recorded, I have a question to ask everyone because it's related about IT. So I did receive an email from IT saying they needed to do a check on.
Phishing. I checked with Jessica.
Yes, it's.
It is a fish.
It is,
Okay,
yes.
that's why I wanted to ask, because I'm like, ooh, yeah, where they're asking for.
Delete it.
I've been getting text messages saying
know.
that they're used.